Chapter 21, Ravenlock's Tower. Ryan sat alone in his study, tracing the contours of his latest spell on parchment. He had deliberately trained his mind to work this way, because as Edison once said, genius is 99% perspiration and only 1% inspiration. Raw talent might give you a head start, and flashes of insight could spark a breakthrough, but without relentless practice, even the brightest idea amounts to nothing. Ryan, however, wasn't content with mere proficiency. He was weaving his skills together so that their combined power would exceed the sum of their parts. High above, on the castle's 8th floor, another figure tested his own mettle. A massive, bear-like man, broad-shouldered, shaggy of hair, clutching a battered crossbow, stood before a hulking stone golem that barred the corridor. "Cowardly pests," he muttered under his breath. As he spoke, the golem lunged. With a single sidestep, the man let it slam into the wall. Cracks spidered outward until the ancient masonry shattered, revealing a spiral staircase winding upward into darkness. Without hesitation, he climbed. Step by step, the staircase carried him higher, the torches growing taller and brighter until he emerged before the familiar oak door of the headmaster's office, its brass knob gleaming. He knocked firmly. "Come in," called a warm voice from within. The man pushed the door open. "Good evening, sir," he greeted, ducking his head respectfully. Albus Dumbledore looked up from his desk, his twinkling eyes crinkling behind half-moon spectacles. "Ah, good evening, Hagrid," he replied with a welcoming smile. "Please, have a seat. I take it you've come because of the reports about an unfamiliar phoenix?" "Yes, Professor," Hagrid replied, his beetle-black eyes gleaming beneath tangled hair. "I combed every inch of the Forbidden Forest, questioned Aragog and even Bane. You know how temperamental Bane can be, but when a centaur of his standing speaks, others listen. Otherwise, I'd have sent word farther afield to the Farron clans." Dumbledore offered a patient smile. "Hagrid, let's not jump to conclusions. It may have simply passed through." Or, Hagrid's excitement made his voice tremble. "Or what?" Dumbledore paused, stroking his beard. "Well, perhaps Fawkes has found a companion. Phoenixes are famously solitary, but if there's a chance our dear friend has bonded with another, it would explain this sighting, and why he wouldn't appear solely for an old caretaker like myself." "Professor, old?" Hagrid protested, aghast. What neither Hagrid nor Dumbledore realized was that the phoenix in question, known in human circles as Ryan, had no inkling of the unique incarnation magic Hairbow had devised. Ryan's own cautious nature had kept him from returning to Hogwarts in phoenix form for quite some time. Were it not for Dumbledore's persistent letters, Penelope's discreet nudges, and Hagrid's unavoidable gossip, he might never have revealed himself on these grounds again. Late at night, the Ravenclaw common room lay silent and deserted. Penelope sat alone at one of the polished oaken tables, pages of ancient tomes spread before her. She glanced frequently at the clock on the wall, waiting for the hour Ryan had mentioned in his letter, and for what he had called an unimaginable sight. The chamber itself felt almost otherworldly. A wide, circular room, it was framed by tall, arched windows draped in blue and bronze silk. By day, those windows looked out on rolling hills and distant mountains, but at this hour only moonlight filtered in, casting silver pools across the dark carpet, itself dotted with stars that seemed to mirror the domed ceiling above. Soft starlight danced on the rows of bookshelves, scattered chairs and tables, lending everything a dreamlike quality. Directly opposite the entrance stood a towering statue of Rowena Ravenclaw, carved from pure white marble. The founder's face bore a playful, almost teasing smile. Atop her head rested a delicate circlet, its surface inscribed with tiny letters, "Extraordinary intelligence is mankind's greatest wealth." Beside the statue, a low door led up to the sleeping chambers, its presence a silent reminder of the tower's secrets. Penelope turned a page, conviction and curiosity mingling in her chest. Then, without a sound, a graceful figure materialized at one of the arched windows, its silhouette bathed in pale moonlight. She froze, heart-pounding, as the night's real mystery began to unfold. Chapter: A Midnight Messenger. After countless practice sessions, Ryan had finally learned to mute the thunderous clap that usually announced a phoenix's arrival. Tonight, he slipped into Ravenclaw Tower as quietly as a shadow. Perched outside Penelope's window, he tapped gently with his gleaming beak. Ravenclaw's wards ran deep, ancient enchantments left by the sorcerer Klobu over 1,000 years ago, and nothing, not even a phoenix, could breach them without a living hand to open the way. Penelo glanced at the clock built into the stone wall. Midnight, exactly. A soft patter of tiny stones against glass caught his ear. He peered into the courtyard by moonlight. There, on the sill, stood Ryan, his iridescent plumage flickering like embers. A slender blue ribbon was tied around the bird's right leg. "Ryan," Penelo whispered in astonishment, "it's really you." He threw open the window. Ryan swooped inside on silent wings, settled on the edge of Penelo's desk, and lowered his head in greeting. Penelo untied the ribbon and unrolled the attached parchment. The message was brief. "Good evening, Penelo. There are no classes tomorrow morning. Rest well, Ryan." Penelo's heart leapt. He smiled in the dim firelight, picturing the astonishment of his classmates when they discovered the unexpected holiday. He couldn't help but think, if Harry Potter had ever convalesced here after his injury in Book 2, Dobby the house elf would never have found him, unless, of course, the headmaster opened a secret back door. Ryan let out a soft coo, as if pleased by Penelo's surprise. Then, in a flash of violet flame, he vanished into the night. Penelo closed the window and settled back onto his bed, the letter clutched in his hand. "No morning classes," he murmured. "I wonder what tomorrow will bring." Chapter 8. Midnight in Ravenclaw Tower. At the stroke of midnight, Ryan slipped into the silent Ravenclaw common room to meet Penelo, this time in a guise she'd never imagined. A slender blue ribbon tied around his neck marked him unmistakably as her secret ally. When the lamplit shadows shifted, he transformed before her eyes into a living, blazing phoenix. Penelo's hand flew to her chest. "Are you an animagus, or some kind of magical beast?" The phoenix lowered its head, gently tapping her forehead with its gleaming beak. Then, without uttering a word aloud, it reached out to her mind. "It's not transfiguration magic. This is my incarnation, another version of myself." Penelo's cheeks warmed as she gazed up at those molten gold eyes. "It's incredible." He let out a soft, crackling croon, feathers flickering like sparks. "This is 2 spells working together. First, I perfected mind-to-mind communication in just 10 days, partly so Jack can't eavesdrop if there's a language barrier, and partly so that next time you see me in fox form, you won't be lost for words. Second, this phoenix incarnation itself, nothing like a Patronus. You can't speak without that telepathy." She ran her fingers over his iridescent wing, awed. "Without your telepathic link, we'd still be scratching messages in the dust and channeling magic to write every sentence." The phoenix bowed its head once more, a plume of fiery embers drifting into the air. Penelo exhaled, her heart thudding in delight. "It really is astonishing." For a moment, the hush of the Ravenclaw Tower felt charged with pure magic. Just the 2 of them, bound by ribbon and spell, beneath the watchful glow of midnight. Meanwhile, across the room, Dumbledore, who was talking to Hagrid via Owlpost, suddenly straightened as if he'd just pieced something tog. Ether. A mysterious smile drifted across his face. At that very moment, a small figure crept out from beneath the sofa. "Humph, so it was you, Ryan, the phoenix," she whispered, pointing at him. Moonlight fell across her features, revealing a mischievous grin. "Kate!" Penelo blurted, eyes wide with surprise. "Kate!" Though she'd braced herself for this moment, Kate's heart fluttered at the sound of Ryan's voice. She straightened her shoulders. "What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be in bed?" Penelo frowned. "You're acting odd tonight. You normally turn in by 10. Something's up." Kate tilted her head and smiled. "Let's cut to the chase. How did you figure out that Ryan is the phoenix? Did you read my letter?" Penelo gasped. "No, of course not. Did you sneak a peek at my mail? You can't just—" Kate laughed softly. "I didn't need to. I was right behind you in the library. You never noticed me. I just wanted to give you a little surprise." Standing off to the side, Ryan watched them both, stunned. "Well, at least now I know. Kate won't be turning up every time I sneak off on a date." Chapter 22. The Magic of Love. Nestled within Nottingham Forest, the oldest primeval woodland in the United Kingdom, a lofty castle rose against the morning sky. Inside, Ryan tossed and turned in a bed draped in rose-pink linens. His eyes slowly swept across the room, taking in the frilly curtains and porcelain knickknacks his mother had insisted on. Normally, he'd have redecorated long ago, but ever since he'd crossed over and become something between Joe Yee and Ryan Smith, he couldn't make up his mind about anything. Last night, he'd met Penelope and Kate in the castle's great hall. What was meant to be a simple catch-up session turned into hours of sharing daily routines, idle gossip, and half-serious confidences. Penelope fought off drowsiness with stifled yawns, while Kate, peculiarly energetic, peppered Ryan with questions that, in hindsight, felt more like probing. By the time he noticed how much he'd revealed about himself, he'd already slipped up. Embarrassed, he'd taken his leave shortly after midnight. He returned to his room around 2 a.m., only to discover that his body was surging toward a level 4 transformation. So much raw energy pulsed through him that sleep proved elusive. At 6 o'clock sharp, he bolted upright, wide awake, an unexpected consequence of his efforts to preserve the need for rest. With his newfound powers, he could have easily abandoned sleep altogether, but he stubbornly clung to the habit. Outside, the forest lay bathed in dawn's soft light. Inside, Ryan swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, determination settling in his chest. Today he would learn to control his transformations, and perhaps, in the process, unlock the magic of love. Even for someone like Ryan, whose Ouroboros magic lets him restore any spent energy in a single breath, foregoing sleep is little more than an excuse to eat a bit more, or to skip meals entirely and rely on magic instead. Pulling all-nighters, fasting, soaring through the clouds, these feats have become second nature to him. Yet in this world of wizardry, spellcasting is more than technical prowess. It's an expression of the soul. Rest and good food are as much nourishment for the spirit as they are for the body. And love, the greatest magic of all, as Dumbledore often reminds his students, and the very force Lily once wielded, can even rebound a killing curse and send Voldemort crashing to the ground. It's been months since Ryan first met Penelope Clearwater and Katie Bell. The joyful spell and the happy spell, charms taught only in third year, were long ago mastered by Ryan's natural talent. But after his encounter with Penelope and Katie last night, something changed. A quiet joy now weaves through his magic, elevating those once simple spells into something altogether new. Joyful charm, love 3, love before, raced. Strength, 17, ordinary humans cap at 10. Constitution 30, ordinary humans cap at 10. Magic power 25, ordinary humans cap at 10. Skills thinking, 1% toward level 5, body transformation. Level 3, 92%. Alchemy level 3, 15%. Charm level 4, 1%. Potions level 2, 13%. Transfiguration level 3. Gunfighting level 3, 3%. Martial art 2, 23%. Reconnaissance level 2, 45%. Special abilities, Phoenix Incarnation level percent. Telepathy 1, 27%. Reaching charm level 4 is what most wizards manage only if they're 7th-year students at Hogwarts who've studied day and night. Even then, they usually master just a handful of level 4 or level 5 spells, and those are the standard classroom charms. Their overall magic rarely exceeds level 3. Yet by drawing on pure, untainted joy, without a shred of cynicism, I pushed Joyful Charm all the way to level 5, while keeping my other spells comfortably at level 4. It makes you wonder, was Harry's victory over Voldemort really just a product of love, courage, and other intangible forces made manifest? Ryan already understood the truth, yet he found himself momentarily at a loss for words. His Black Knight, gifted with lightning-fast marksmanship and a smart, formidable physique, paired with his expert gunplay, would leave even a wizard like Harry Potter with no chance to draw a wand. If they ever faced off again, Ryan decided, he'd keep the trash talk to a minimum. Anyone fragile enough to be rattled by insults hardly merited the effort, and those whose faith ran deep wouldn't be swayed by bravado anyway. They'd only use the momentary pause to steel their resolve. That said, Harry's true strength lay elsewhere. In the final crisis, his Patronus charm transcended mere magic. By then, he didn't need to cast it. The light of his Patronus shone from within, shielding him from the Dementor's despair. As he stood on the brink of death, he pressed his lips to the golden snitch that concealed the resurrection stone. Only at that moment did Dumbledore's final gift fully emerge. The souls of Harry's lost loved ones appeared, each taking shape as an invisible guardian, guiding Harry into whatever lay beyond. That old fox Dumbledore, always one step ahead, and always delighting in a dramatic flourish. Snape's voice shook with barely contained fury as he confronted Dumbledore, hidden in the shadows of the now silent castle corridor. "I was your spy. I wove lies for you. I risked my life over and over again, all to protect Lily Potter's son. And now you tell me you've been raising him like a lamb to the slaughter?" Unseen by Snape, elsewhere in the castle, Harry's own magic was surging to new heights. Thanks to the Resurrection Stone, already in Dumbledore's possession before his orchestrated demise, Harry's Patronus charm had climbed to an unprecedented level 6. Dumbledore, who had quietly mastered the stone's secrets, had foreseen the moment when Voldemort would attempt to rebuild himself using Harry's blood. Far from a tragic oversight, Voldemort's act of sewing Harry's lifeblood into his own body fulfilled Dumbledore's ultimate design. Lily's selfless protection lived on in both Harry and the Dark Lord. By intertwining their veins, Voldemort had unwittingly bound Harry's life to his own. So long as the Dark Lord endured, the ancient sacrificial magic Lily bestowed could never fully fade. In Dumbledore's grand plan, the love that should have died within Harry at 17 instead persisted, silent, unbreakable, woven into the very heart of the enemy he would one day have to face. Chapter 12. The Last Gift. Voldemort had never known love, and never would. From the moment he stepped through that dilapidated graveyard and felt the snake's venom coursing through his veins, he was shackled by an invisible chain forged from unnatural magic. That same magic had cost his mother her life and left Tom Riddle utterly incapable of the one emotion that might have humanized him. Albus Dumbledore understood exactly what bound Voldemort so tightly and how to break it. If anyone could have sensed and destroyed that psychic link, it was the old headmaster. Yet Voldemort, in his arrogance, could not. Instead, he remained prey to the very darkness he had created. Dumbledore's final plan hinged on this flaw. He meant for Voldemort to destroy his own last Horcrux, Nagini, the living vessel of his remaining soul, thus ridding the world of the Dark Lord forever. It was to be the ultimate gift from teacher to former pupil, the chance for Tom Riddle to end his own defilement. But fate, as always, had other ideas. Severus Snape, secretly ordered to slay Nagini, fell victim to the serpent's lethal bite before he could fulfill his task. In that moment, Dumbledore's masterstroke seemed ruined, until Neville Longbottom, the boy named in prophecy, seized his chance. With one brave swing of Gryffindor's sword, Neville beheaded Nagini, shattering Voldemort's last fragment of immortality. Even Dumbledore must have tasted disappointment mingled with relief. In truth, he had prepared two contingencies. Plan A was to follow the old script, allow Harry to press on alone, unencumbered by pity or hesitation. If Hermione, ever pragmatic and skeptical of once-upon-a-time props, and Ron, loyal to a fault, could not persuade Harry to veer off course, then Harry would have no choice but to face Voldemort's final Horcrux himself. Plan B, the backup, lay dormant like a chess piece waiting to be deployed. But with Neville's intervention and Nagini's head rolling between the shattered stones, the path to Voldemort's downfall had never been clearer. All that remained was for Harry to confront the Dark Lord one last time and finish what Dumbledore had begun. Chapter 7. 7 Trials. Ryan's choices lay before him like diverging paths in a dark forest. He could gather the 3 Deathly Hallows and, using their incomparable magic, ally with Severus Snape, the double agent, to drive Voldemort from the wizarding world and restore peace. Or he could follow the counsel of his 2 closest friends, seek out and destroy every Horcrux, accept the truth that death would claim him when his task was done, and then vanquish the Dark Lord once and for all. Between these options stood 7 ancient volumes, each charting one of the unseen trials destined to shape his fate. With every page he turned, Ryan felt his courage tempered and his soul sharpened into a blade capable of killing Voldemort. By his 5th year, the Dark Lord no longer dared invade his mind as he once had. Dumbledore insisted it was Ryan's unblemished spirit that repelled every attempt. Voldemort, obsessed with fracturing his own soul beyond repair, had busied himself forging yet another Horcrux from Myrtle's death, and driving Hagrid into hiding to punish his former ally. Tonight, Ryan hunched over a stack of hopeful tomes, the magic of love, protecting family, the bonds between people, seeking the oldest, strongest magic of all. But as he read, he found only sentimental platitudes and average incantations. From a child's viewpoint, Those pages once stirred his heart. Now they felt hollow. And yet he knew love remained the indispensable ingredient in every true spell. He blinked at the clock. 9 o'clock already. A sudden crackle of movement drew his eyes to the door. There, in the lamplight, stood Jack, expression grave. "You're still up?" Jack whispered, stepping inside. Ryan closed the book with measured calm. The real trial, he sensed, was just beginning. "Master, there's a letter for you." I watched the snowy owl tilt its head, urging me forward. Of course it was a letter, and a bit of a nuisance, too. By Smith family decree, or perhaps due to a hidden enchantment, Owlpost cannot deliver mail directly to the manor. Instead, every missive must be dropped at a lone tower perched on the rim of a distant canyon. Without house elves to fetch it, reclaiming one's own mail meant a 3-hour trek across rough, winding trails. That very precaution had thwarted Voldemort's 3 assaults. I'd inspected the site not long ago. On the canyon floor lay the bodies of several Death Eaters, their wands still intact among the rocks, a grim reminder of how fiercely our defenses held. Chapter 23, History of Magic. Ryan flopped onto the armchair, holding Penelope's latest letter. "Another one from you, Penelope? Didn't we just talk last night? Do you really enjoy writing letters that much?" he complained as he tore open the envelope. In the original books, Percy and Penelope exchanged letters every day, but most of us prefer to say what we need face to face. Clearly, Penelope finds that harder than putting quill to parchment. He scanned the first lines and sighed. "You're still griping about history of magic?" From her point of view, the entire course was cursed by the ghost professor Cuthbert Binns. She described his lectures as endless droning. He reads directly from the textbook in a breathless, labored monotone that practically lulls the class to sleep. No matter how hard she tried to focus, her eyelids would start to droop the moment he took the podium. But Ryan had a different theory. To him, the real problem wasn't just Binns's delivery, it was the textbook itself. The material was dry, poorly organized, and crammed with obscure facts in a lifeless narrative. He'd been itching to complain ever since he first opened that dusty tome, yet in the Smith household he had no one to commiserate with. All the enchanted portraits had vanished, except for the one cracked painting in the bathroom that screamed insults at odd hours. Who wants to discuss scholarly frustrations with a talking portrait that only shows up when you're mid-shower? Penelope's letter ended on a note of desperate exhaustion, and Ryan felt a surge of kinship. He grabbed a fresh sheet of parchment, dipped his quill, and began to write back with more enthusiasm than he'd felt all week. "Penelope, I hear you. Binns is dull as dishwater, and that textbook might as well be written in ancient runes." He smirked as he added a few choice lines about his own history of magic struggles. Finally, someone to share the rant with. Jack stared in confusion as Penelope unwittingly stepped into the trap. He thought back to his own frustrations with the history of magic. Its pages were cluttered with dry dates and names, but offered no real story. Take the Goblin Rebellion, for example. There was no mention of the tensions that sparked it, no description of how wizards marshaled their defenses, and certainly no hint of the peace negotiations that followed. If only the history of magic read like a Muggle history text, rich with drama and detail, then even the most wheezy, drawling recitation could captivate Hermione's ear. Jack imagined fleshing out those biographies with the vivid detail they deserved. Ignatius Wildsmith, the brilliant inventor of flue powder, whose innovation transformed wizarding travel overnight. Magenta Comstock, the trailblazing portrait artist, whose bitter feud with the Smith clan fueled her experiments, portraits that shifted and whispered to match each viewer's mood. Mungo Bonham, whose dedication gave birth to St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, a sanctuary for wizarding folk in their darkest hours. Cleona, the astute Irish druid who first uncovered the moon dew flower's restorative properties, changing potion-making forever. If history could flow that smoothly, Jack was certain Hermione wouldn't stand a chance against his hypnotic reader's voice, no matter how breathless or dragged out it sounded. Magical history is often told through its great inventions and landmark achievements. We celebrate enchanted engines and arcane breakthroughs, works that change the world. Yet every so often, a figure emerges more for oddity than for innovation. None is quite as peculiar as the wizard Ulrich, a notorious eccentric who insisted on wearing a hat woven from live jellyfish. His reputation endures in countless anecdotes, each one stranger and less useful than the last. Perhaps this is why Ryan Smith felt an almost visceral aversion to the conventional history of magic. He didn't reject Bathilda Bagshot's celebrated tome out of disdain for scholarship. After all, her History of Magic, first published by He Little Red Book Company in 1947, had already struck many of Ulrich's more absurd stories from its pages. Instead, Ryan's distaste ran deeper, as though a stubborn instinct had been passed down through generations of his family. The Smiths were never ones for crowds or accolades. They loathed gallery walls, lined with their portraits, and eluded every public ceremony where their name might be praised. Their true passion was alchemy, the careful, measured transformation of base materials into something greater. To outsiders, they seemed aloof, perhaps even untouchable. But to those who knew the family lore, the Smiths embodied a singular trait long associated with pure, unadulterated magic, the Akaran temperament, a quiet intensity that valued substance over spectacle. For Ryan, then, the annals of magic, populated by oddballs like Ulrich, felt hollow. He preferred the silent hum of his family's secluded laboratory, where glass vials glowed softly, and ancient manuscripts whispered of possibilities yet to be realized. Here, magic wasn't a sideshow. It was a legacy, etched into every Smith in the blood they shared. Wizarding families with centuries-old lineages often carry distinctive traits that help them endure. The Ollivanders, for example, are fanatically devoted to wands and gifted with near-photographic memories. The Potters, lean and keenly perceptive, are famous for their unruly hair. They even invented a specialty shampoo to tame it. Severus Snape's greasy locks are said to be the unfortunate byproduct of his refusal to indulge in their family formula. The Malfoys, generation after generation, boast pale complexions, golden hair, and an uncanny talent for social finesse. The Blacks are the most mercurial of all. Though they profess unwavering purity and loyalty, their allegiances twist and turn like a kaleidoscope, driven by paranoia and contradiction. Unsurprisingly, the Black family tree is pruned more heavily than any other pure-blood line. Any member whose beliefs or behavior tarnish the family name is summarily disowned. Standing apart from all of them is Albus Dumbledore, cherished by his phoenix, blessed with extraordinary longevity, and unrivaled in transfiguration. The Weasleys, ever optimistic and flame-haired, seem to multiply by magic. And the Gaunts, ancestors of Voldemort, are as obstinate and merciless as snakes, their cruelty a chilling echo of Salazar Slytherin himself. Centuries of inbreeding granted the Gaunts their uncanny gifts, every child born with the ability to speak Parseltongue and raw, explosive magical power. But that same insularity became their undoing. Over generations, stubbornness and an inflexible devotion to family tradition hardened into a kind of self-imposed exile. They sneered at the wider wizarding world and refused Hogwarts' open doors. Without new blood or fresh ideas, their proud estate fell into chaos, its treasures pillaged by extravagance and neglect. By the time Marvolo Gaunt's only child, Merope, came of age, the family's name was all that remained of its former glory. Instead of an arranged match, most scandalously, with her own uncle Morphin, Merope resorted to an illicit potion, seducing the wealthy Tom Riddle of their village. The lovers fled together, leaving the Gaunt line effectively extinct. Marvolo never forgave his grandson for tarnishing the family name, and Voldemort, in turn, dismissed Morphin as unworthy of being called uncle. In the wizarding world, the inheritance of magic often carries more ancestral weight than mere blood, or even genes, could ever convey. With these thoughts in mind, Ryan finished writing his letter. He handed it to Jack for delivery, then turned eagerly to the next phase of his research, ready to bring his latest magical experiment to life. Ryan had succeeded where so many before him had failed. He'd reproduced the counter-curse for the Sword of the Immortal. Drawing on every scrap of reconnaissance he'd ever mastered, he carefully reconstructed the spell formula. According to the original notes, penned in Snape's precise hand, the antidote to the sword's lethal poison lay not in rare herbs or complicated incantations, but in the pure regret born from separation, the grief of losing Lily, Harry's mother. Ryan now faced one final question. Could he trigger the counter-curse simply by summoning Snape's likeness in his mind, pairing it with a vivid image of Lily and speaking her name aloud. If so, he would need more than theory. He would need tangible reminders of Lily's life. So he assembled an array of photographs: Lily's proud elementary school graduation portrait, candid snapshots from her days at Hogwarts, and even a single, tear-stained wedding photo. Tracking down Snape's youth proved far harder. No archive in either the Muggle or Wizarding worlds held a reliable childhood image. Ryan spent weeks negotiating with both ministry archivists and dusty bookstall vendors, determined to unearth any fragment of Severus's past. If he ever made it to Hogwarts himself, he planned to gift Snape these recovered relics at Christmas, proof that every memory, even the most painful, could be preserved. There was one last piece missing: Lily's full name. In his previous life, he'd never paused to memorize it: Lily Evans before her marriage and Lily Potter after. Now the distinction mattered. Ryan closed his eyes and, drawing a shaky breath, sketched James Potter's familiar face in his mind. Steeling himself, he prepared to whisper the name that might finally activate Snape's counter-curse and save them all. Without uttering a single incantation, an invisible blade shot forth from the tip of the White Knight's staff. Ryan instinctively gripped the staff as though it were a sword hilt, and the level 5 technique, Shen Feng Wuing, obeyed his will in an instant. This time, the blade didn't launch itself off the staff as it normally would. Instead, it remained firmly attached, ready for a direct strike. Ryan fixed his gaze on the training dummy standing before him and unleashed a powerful swing. The blade cleaved the dummy in two, leaving a deep, inky rift that pulsed with dark magic. Even I had to admit, this was far more potent than any spell I could cast by ordinary means. Next, Ryan murmured to himself, let's see how it handles toxins. Which method will prove more effective? A slow, satisfied smile curved his lips. He was about to explore a completely new application, one even Professor Snape himself probably hadn't considered. Chapter 24, The Experiment of Love. Ryan stood before his target, a life-size training dummy cleaved in two. He raised the shadowless divine sharpness, the gleaming blade that never cast a shadow, and took a deep breath. First experiment, he announced. In his mind's eye, he summoned the memory of Lily Potter on her wedding day, radiant in white. The instant he called her name, a strange, remorse-tinged magic surged from his wand, pouring into the broken edges of the dummy. Dark, tangled currents of residual enchantment recoiled like a retreating tide. On his enchanted stopwatch, the timer winked. 3 seconds. He rechanneled the shadowless divine sharpness and struck again, severing the dummy as before. Second experiment. This time, he conjured Lily Evans as she had been in primary school, bright-eyed and innocent. Magic suffused his blade once more, knitting the gash with a lighter, more hopeful tone. The stopwatch read 2 seconds. Ryan paused, a crooked smile twisting his lips as a new idea took hold. He steadied his breath, raised the blade, and let the memories flow in. Lily Prince. In his mind was not a childhood snapshot, nor a bridal portrait, but Lily as an adult, standing beside Severus Snape in wedding finery. Joy and regret, mingled like molten gold and iron, thundered through his wand. The torrent of emotion smashed into the dummy's broken halves, and the two pieces snapped together with a living pulse, as though the figure were breathing again. Ryan lowered his blade, satisfaction flickering in his eyes. 3 different versions of Lily, and 3 different times to heal a broken form. In the quiet aftermath, the dummy stood whole and still, its secret sewn together by the experiment of love. So fast, less than a second. Snape's full enunciation of the shadowless god's counter-curse was astonishing. The venom in Draco's veins evaporated instantly. The bleeding stopped, and the wound closed, as if touched by a handful of fresh white mulberry leaves. The 2 severed halves of the laceration knitted together perfectly, restoring Draco to his unblemished state. The spell's healing power was nothing short of miraculous. In this world, emotions fuel magic. Love, anger, fear, and despair all pour into spells and enchantments, granting them strength. If Voldemort can never know love, does he instead draw upon pain, terror, and death? Is he a psychopomp of the dark arts, guiding souls into forbidden knowledge? Or is he the living embodiment of darkness itself? Ryan's 3 trials revealed a startling trend. The weaker Lily's bond with James, the more powerful the shadowless god's counter-curse became when she cast it. When Ryan conjured an image of Lily Prince, free from her love for James, her ability soared to unprecedented heights. She was, in every measure, extraordinary. Leaning forward, Ryan studied the readings on his control panel. Every data point aligned with his hypothesis. The implications were staggering and just beginning to unfold. I opened the Charms menu and watched Divine Sharpness spike from level 5 to level 6. I never imagined it would be the very first skill to hit 6, probably higher than even its mysterious inventor ever managed. And it wasn't hard to see why it was a sore spot for Professor Snape. He'd once botched it so badly during that legendary 7th duel that he accidentally nicked George's ear. Right below it sat the Killing Curse, Avada Kedavra, though I always call it the Death Curse, currently stuck at level 4. Even at that rank, these two spells are the deadliest projectiles a wizard can cast. Now picture unleashing them from the Black Knight's stance, with its unparalleled speed and evasive footwork. Honestly, is there a single witch or wizard in this world who could stand up to that? Maybe I'm overconfident. But with my mobility and the synergy between Divine Sharpness, the Death Curse, and the Black Knight's agility, I'm edging dangerously close to becoming an unstoppable force. Let's be extravagant today, Ryan mused, a sly smile tugging at his lips. He lifted a slender pipe to his mouth and drew in a slow, steady breath. Inside the bowl lay finely crushed phoenix feather, its ember glowing with an otherworldly radiance. With each inhalation, he felt his mastery of the phoenix incarnation technique deepen, his skill meter ticking upward as latent energy pulsed through his veins. This novel method had appeared only days ago in one of Helbo's obscure notebooks. Costly? Yes. Phoenix feathers were among the rarest reagents in existence, but astonishingly efficient. In conventional practice, a wizard had to sacrifice entire feathers each time they summoned their phoenix incarnation. Here, however, Ryan needed only a few fragments, enough to last through multiple sessions. By chopping a single feather into tiny shards, he extracted its full value without repeated summoning. The time and effort saved were incalculable. With a practiced gesture, he placed the feather fragments into a custom-built incense burner. Leaning forward, he ignited them not with a common spark, but with Gublai fairy fire, also called eternal flame, a self-sustaining blaze mastered by only the most skilled magicians. Under the gentle, perpetual heat, the phoenix feather smoldered to release its magical essence. The smoke was far from choking. It was almost sweet, suffused with latent power. As the fragrant plume curled around him, Ryan quietly intoned the era's call, weaving both spells in tandem. The dual practice accelerated his progress as nothing else could. He exhaled, watching the ember in his pipe brighten for a moment before fading. Today, extravagance wasn't just indulgence, it was efficiency at its most refined. And for Ryan, every spark of that eternal flame was a step closer to true mastery of the Phoenix incarnation. Only by drawing on the Phoenix's eternal flame can one truly absorb its power. The sensation is oddly soothing, like inhaling a warm, gentle liquor rather than raw, scorching fire. And yet, once it courses through your veins, it ignites a burning heat deep within. It bears no resemblance to a raging inferno, which is easy to conjure but almost impossible to tame. Gubler's fairy fire demands both precision and patience. For someone at Ryan's level, just a 4th year, mastering this spell is virtually unheard of. Most witches and wizards don't even attempt it until they reach level 5, and Hogwarts itself bars the incantation from its curriculum. The ancient notes mention a crucial advantage. If you invoke the Phoenix avatar first, you infuse your magic with a fragment of the bird's own essence, making the summoning of fairy fire significantly more manageable. Ryan's unique birthright granted him a sliver of that eternal flame to begin with, loosening the spell's grip on the caster. But even so, it took him nearly a month of relentless practice to coax out a single flickering orb of fire. In theory, the incantation isn't cloaked in secrecy. It's lengthy, fiendishly difficult to pronounce, and known to the magical community. In practice, though, only one wizard at Hogwarts has ever succeeded in wielding it, Albus Dumbledore. This chapter closes on a note of uneasy truce, but the story is far from over. Read on to discover how ancient bargains and hidden powers will shape what comes next. It all began with the peculiar bond between their family's bloodline and the Phoenix, a bond magnified by their possession of the Elder Wand. In Part 5, the Patriarch entrusted Rubeus Hagrid with a singular mission, to present the Giants with a vial of Goobler fairy fire, an offering meant to sway their allegiance. That decision nearly paid off. The Giants, renowned for their fierce tempers, found themselves spellbound by the perpetual flame. No ember ever died. Any meal cooked over its fire bestowed prodigious strength on the eater. A wizarding family, or an entire magical people, could tap into its power indefinitely. Under normal circumstances, such a gift would secure lifelong loyalty. But two obstacles stood in Hagrid's way. First, Voldemort's iron-fisted edicts forbade any deviation from his commands. Second, the Giants' own bloodthirsty nature made them fickle allies. Though tempted, they ultimately recoiled from dependence on a power they could neither control nor understand. Yet the tale takes an even more curious turn when we look back at the Smith lineage. Generations ago, the family once wielded this fairy fire themselves. In a single stroke of guile, a Smith patriarch bartered it away to the Goblin Council. In exchange, the goblins divulged their most jealously guarded secret, the method for forging enchanted silverware. That technique, they insisted, could never be taught. Only one Smith at a time may witness its secrets each generation. To a goblin, the art of the silversmith is as vital as any wizard's greatest wand. And so the pieces are set. A never-dying flame, a fractured giant tribe, ancient rivalries between goblins and witches, and a Dark Lord's rising power, all converge in the chapters ahead. Turn the page to see whose allegiances will hold and whose will shatter. Just as in the wizard's world, only witches and wizards have the skill and the legal right to craft magic wands. No other magical race may use them. In the original story, this law is precisely why Crouch dismissed his house elf Winky. She was found holding a wizard's wand. Over the years, the goblin smiths who came after the wandmakers never managed to recreate fairy fire either. It isn't for lack of effort, it's simply that none of them cared enough to master it, or perhaps they lacked the necessary spark of talent. That's a shame, because fairy fire is invaluable. Food cooked over its embers fortifies the next generation, keeping them free from disease and misfortune. Its extracts are prized in alchemy, too. In fact, the goblins have all but abandoned their famed silverwork in exchange for alchemical breakthroughs centered on fairy fire. To them, once you possess fairy fire, the old silver forging techniques become obsolete, relics of a bygone age. You might wonder why they didn't preserve fairy fire when it was first discovered. The answer is that this is no ordinary flame. From the moment it is conjured, its total essence is fixed. No amount of burning or stoking can enlarge it. There is only one charge of fairy fire, ever, and once it's spent, it's gone. A wizard can only summon so many of these fairy fires in a lifetime. First, the ritual is painstakingly slow. Second, it's almost taboo. Once you produce one, you must wait ages before you can attempt another. In the old days, before magic was formalized, many sages insisted that a mage could only ever create a single fairy fire. Later, scholars discovered that the ability actually operates on a cycle, but because so few wizards could summon more than one, no one ever recorded the exact interval. The strangest thing is this: after crafting the Goobly fairy fire, a wizard's power, body, and mind remain perfectly intact. Yet no matter how flawless your incantation or elegant your gestures, you simply cannot recreate it until the cycle completes. Ryan, however, realized he had no such limitation. His panel, the enchanted slate bearing every incantation he could ever need, never faltered. Embedded within it was the guiding force that would always point him toward success. And so, despite the ancient taboo, he prepared to summon another fairy fire at once. Ryan's gift taught him that it wasn't taboo to recreate a successful spell, but you couldn't simply repeat it word for word. Once you'd summoned something, any second attempt had to use different words, different gestures. If you tried to rerun the exact same ritual, you'd be forced to wait indefinitely. The reason was simple. This magic didn't spring into being in isolation, but arose in response to the world and its surroundings. In practical terms, that meant if a mother wished for another child just like her first, she either had to let her memories of the original fade so the magic could reset, or resign herself to the fact that her next child would take on a different form. Chapter 25. Tianmu. Before Ryan knew it, January was nearly upon him. Over the last few weeks, he'd been obsessively producing fairy fire, enough to light dazzling barbecue nights in the Forbidden Forest and fuel alchemical experiments he hadn't touched in months. December 25th was Christmas, and both Penelope and Kate had breezily informed him by owl that they expected to meet in Hogsmeade on the holiday. Ryan rolled his eyes. Hogwarts closed for winter break all through Christmas, only reopening in early January. Didn't those two have families or homes to go back to? More to the point, he'd been slipping into the castle almost every evening as it was. His feats as the Ravenclaw Phoenix had spread fast through the corridors. If they bumped into each other so often, why resort to letters? Still, Ryan couldn't deny how far he'd come. After relentless practice, his Phoenix Incarnation spell had finally advanced to level 2, and with that breakthrough, the coveted Nirvana skill had ignited. Powers tied to the cycles of life demanded respect, and he approached them with cautious focus. Over the past month, he'd sharpened his thought view to its limits, and even his reconnaissance ability had taken another quantum leap, manifesting now as an uncanny, almost prescient wizard's intuition. With the holiday fast approaching, Ryan tucked his wand into his robes and headed back to the rooftop laboratory, eager to see what new mysteries fairy fire would reveal under the pale winter moon. Ryan had an uncanny talent for unearthing arcane tomes that, to any outsider, appeared entirely irrelevant. Yet within those dusty pages lay exactly the secrets he needed. After months of painstaking research, he at last confirmed that the fabled process of nirvana, the soul's rebirth, truly could regenerate a wizard's body. That renewal, however, only occurred after one reached extreme age or suffered a grievous injury. Even the greatest hurdle, the fear that each rebirth would erase a lifetime's memories, proved surmountable. By applying specialized mental exercises, he discovered he could preserve his recollections through every cycle of death and awakening. In effect, nirvana became a form of slumber. The soul rested, but the mind remained whole. As he pondered this breakthrough, Ryan uncovered yet another hidden facet of wizardry beyond raw magical power or inborn talent. His so-called reconnaissance skill sprang from an unwillingness to remain blind to the subtle currents of magic that suffused the world. By sharpening his awareness and combining it with his natural intellect, he forged a mental identification ability, not unlike the legendary scrying powers found in ancient lore. The deeper he explored, the more he could detect dormant spells and tap into the magnetic fields of magic under the right conditions. Lately, his perception had grown so acute that it bordered on the prophetic third eye spoken of by seers long ago. Now, whenever he willed it, Ryan could draw the precise knowledge he needed from the ether, so long as that knowledge was intrinsically tied to true magic. He sensed this wasn't mere coincidence, but a testament to the irresistible pull that arcane lore exerts on those who immerse themselves in it. Gradually, he realized he was no longer just collecting facts. He was channeling raw magic itself. Scouring musty libraries for forgotten grimoires had become an extension of the very mystical instincts that all true wizards possess. In every strange intuition and hidden whisper of power, Ryan saw the shape of his future mastery. In potion making, following every step in the textbooks merely makes you a skilled craftsman. To become a true master, you must learn to harness your own magical power, and guided by intuition, veer from the prescribed ratios, adding a little more or a little less of an ingredient to create something extraordinary. I have always had this uncanny intuition for alchemy and mathematics, and Ryan inherited it after he crossed over into this world. Relying on our late father's secret manuscript, Ryan even completed the Black Knight potion, an achievement few could rival. This kind of magical instinct is often called the third eye. In truth, prophecy isn't as rare as people think. Within the Ministry of Magic's Department of Mysteries, a handful of wizards, known as the Unspeakables, study the greatest enigmas of existence: love, space, thought, time, death, and prophecy. Deep in their labyrinthine vaults lies the Hall of Prophecy, where dozens of enchanted crystal balls hold real, living predictions. Each orb carries genuine magic and points to a potential future, but not every prophecy is destined to unfold. At its core, a prophecy is simply a possibility, and because it bears true magic, it cannot be faked. Prophets cannot control their own visions, and wizards who hear them cannot simply forget. Given how often crystal balls turn up in the magical world, it's clear that thousands of seers and clairvoyants ply their trade. After all, every form of magic, no matter how ordinary it seems, is, at its heart, training in the art of perceiving what lies ahead. To skeptics like Harry and Hermione, divination at Hogwarts feels quaint and often downright absurd, but for a truly gifted witch or wizard, even the most unassuming course holds the promise of unlocking hidden sight. Not every seer ends up as eccentric as Professor Sybil Trelawney, who insists she's a fraud. As a direct descendant of the legendary prophetess Cassandra, Sybil does, on rare occasions, slip into a genuine trance and utter a true prophecy. In those moments, she speaks with such power that the vision overwhelms her. Once it's spoken, she instantly forgets it, as if her own gift is determined to protect her from its burden. If it weren't for the enchanted registry housed in the Department of Mysteries, an arcane ledger not unlike Hogwarts's enchanted admission book, every spoken prophecy in Britain would be lost the instant it passed a seer's lips. Instead, each prophecy is carefully bottled and stored in its crystal orb, forever preserved in the prophecy records. Professor Sybil Trelawney has uttered only one genuine prophecy in her lifetime. That solitary glimpse into the future is the sole reason divination and its twin subject, arithmancy, remains part of the Hogwarts curriculum. Some whisper, too, that Dumbledore's faith in her abilities ran deeper than admiration for any ordinary teacher. He saw in her a spark of true sight, a gift he prized above all else. Prophetic visions rarely arrive fully formed. Seers speak of drifting into half-conscious trances, recalling only fragments of what they've seen, yet still knowing beyond doubt that they possess a divine eye. When she's awake, Sybil Trelawney often resorts to tea leaves, crystal balls, or the flash of a tarot card to coax out her insights, but ironically, she rarely trusts her own readings. These thoughts drifted into Harry's mind as he stood in his private memory palace, opening to Chapter 10 of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. The title glowed above the words he'd read so many times, The House of Gaunt. And then, somewhere in the back of his mind, the scene shifted. Harry slipped along the deserted corridor outside the divination classroom, his footsteps silent on the cool stone floor. Rounding a corner, he spotted Professor Trelawney herself. Hunched and murmuring, she shuffled a dog-eared deck of playing cards, bending her head to study each card's worn symbol, as though it held the fate of the world. Quick as a shadow, Harry pressed himself against a statue of Rowena Ravenclaw, his heart thumping. Professor Trelawney didn't notice him. She was lost in her own divinations, and Harry had every intention of keeping it that way. Professor Trelawney flipped over her cards with a mutter as she drifted past Harry's hiding place. 2 of spades, conflict. 7 of spades, a bad omen. 10 of spades, violence. Jack of spades, a dark-haired young man, probably distressed and unwilling to be questioned. Harry pressed himself flat against the cold stone of the statue, breath caught in his throat. He watched her robe swirl around the base, then felt her footsteps shift to the opposite side. "This can't be right," she grumbled, her voice thin with irritation. With a sharp snap, she jammed the cards back into their deck and began to reshuffle so fiercely that the cards cracked and rasped against one another. The faint, acrid scent of sherry lingered in the air as she swept away, oblivious to the boy hiding in her shadow. Ryan, leaning against a nearby pillar, sighed softly. "Poor Sybil," he murmured. He tapped his wand idly against his palm. Her family lines go back to the priestesses of Apollo, yet look at her now, reduced to fumbling with random divinations. It's almost a curse. If her instincts had been devoted to potions or alchemy, she could have been one of the great witches of her age. Instead, she's scoffed at by Professor McGonagall, harried by that petty official Urimuch in the 5th office, and nearly driven out of Hogwarts altogether. What a shame. Harry's heart raced as Trelawney's soft footsteps faded away. Now that she'd moved on, he had only moments to decide his next move. It's often said that the surest way to keep others from daring to challenge you is to turn talent into true power. When it came to Professor Sybil Trelawney, Albus Dumbledore took that lesson to heart. To shield her from prying eyes, he quietly hid her role as the seer of the prophecy concerning the Chosen One. No witch or wizard suspected that the very prophecy destined to bring about Voldemort's downfall had originated from the lips of a so-called madwoman, Sybil Trelawney, infamous for her wild-eyed rants and dubious claims. As a result, she never enjoyed the fame her gift deserved. Outside Hogwarts, her only acknowledged distinction was that she was the great-great-granddaughter of the ancient oracle Cassandra. Of course, the Dark Lord eventually learned of the prophecy, partly through Severus Snape's secret visits to the castle. Once Voldemort had confirmed its authenticity, he resolved to confront it head-on, though not without cunning. The prophecy's true power lay not in some mysterious magic it described, but in the fact that Voldemort himself had marked a single child as his destined adversary. From that moment, only the marked child could fulfill the oracle. Only one of them would survive the final confrontation. In truth, had Voldemort refrained from attacking the family that had already thwarted him 3 times, he might have prolonged his existence indefinitely by hiding safely behind his Horcruxes. Yet his pride would not allow restraint, and so the prophecy set its inexorable course. "Ryan," he began, "if the Voldemort family, this powerful wizarding clan, has already shrugged off 2 of my assaults, I'm done targeting them personally. From now on, I'll either train my subordinates properly or turn them over to my cause. As for prophecy," he continued, leaning forward, "it only comes true when you believe in it and when you act on it. Otherwise, why do so many genuine prophecies lie forgotten in the Hall of Prophecies, never fulfilled?" Chapter 26. Hagrid, the King of Monsters. Early morning light filtered through the dense canopy as countless glowing sprites flitted among the trees. The sun's first rays fell upon a slender, emerald-green foal standing sentinel at the forest's edge, dissipating the lingering mist with a gentle warmth. By the lake shore, a young unicorn colt, its coat shimmering like burnished gold, nuzzled at the water's surface, blissfully unaware of the world around it. A tall, dignified adult unicorn, its hide as pale as moonlight, stooped to drink. Every now and then, it prodded a vividly colored bubblefish floating in the shallows, sending ripples across the mirror-smooth water. Hidden in the long grass, squat goblins, roughly the size and shape of potatoes, peered out with wide, curious eyes, scarcely daring to breathe as they observed the majestic creatures. A short distance away, the centaur Bane led a group of young foals in identifying medicinal herbs. Normally quick-tempered, he surprised everyone this morning with his patience, guiding each pupil's hand as they learned to distinguish root from leaf. Closer to Hagrid's hut, a flock of thestrals gathered expectantly. Their skeletal heads twitched, and they snorted softly at the smell of meat. From a battered bucket, Hagrid scattered chunks of bloody raw flesh. The thestrals lunged forward eagerly, tearing at the meal. Nearby, Yaya trembled, her nose twitching, and wisely kept her distance from these creatures of shadow. Not far from this grisly feast, a group of hippogriffs stood in a proud semicircle. Their bright orange eyes glimmered in the morning sun, then turned away in haughty disdain as they surveyed the scene around Hagrid's humble wooden cabin. It was a peaceful dawn at the edge of the forbidden forest. Yet even in such tranquil beauty, Hagrid reigned supreme, tending to his monstrous charges with a gentle hand and an unshakable bond. It was early morning in the heart of the forbidden forest when I, Ryan in my full phoenix form, perched on a low branch and studied Rubeus Hagrid with my keen, golden eyes. Flicking through the data in my mind, I noted. He was a half-giant wizard. His strength registered at 30, where ordinary humans top out at 10, constitution at 34, and magic at 25, again, far beyond any human limit. His skill set was equally astonishing. Animal affinity level 3, taming level 5, charms level 4, potions and transfiguration each at level 3, and magical biology level 5. Those numbers were staggering. Hagrid's magical power alone rivaled that of a fully trained adult wizard, and his raw strength and endurance dwarfed my own. If he'd ever decided to push his gifts to the limit, no ordinary wizards would have stood a chance. Yet in the original timeline, to keep Dumbledore from scandal, Hagrid surrendered quietly and spent years locked away in Azkaban. What a waste. A truly exceptional talent both in magic and in martial prowess. Taming level 5? No wonder he managed to crossbreed a manticore and a fire crab, producing the explosive-tailed Scroot. And an animal affinity of 3? That explained why, in ancient Greek tales, he was celebrated as the king of monsters. Perched there in the dappled dawn light, I couldn't help but marvel at the half-giant's untapped potential and wonder how different things might become if he ever chose to unleash it. Ryan often transformed into a phoenix in his spare time, slipping into Hogwarts to explore corners of the castle ordinary students wouldn't dare to visit. Just last night, during the after-dinner reading hour, he came across a slim volume titled Ancient Greece, Things You Don't Know. Buried among its myths and legends was a fascinating chapter on the Monster Kingdom, a hidden realm populated by magical beasts of at least fourth strength. There were Tibo warthogs, giants, centaurs, thestrals, chimeras, Catalonian fireball dragons, and countless other rare creatures. According to the giants, who, unlike most monsters, could converse with humans, this kingdom owed its unity and stability to a single ruler, the Alid King of Monsters, Rubeus Hagrid. Of course, to the giants he was much more than a mere monarch. In their tales he was known by many grand titles: Stone Hagrid Forest, Thunderstorm of the Hagrid lineage, Hercules of the Forbidden Forest, Controller of Giant Kind, Mentor of the Darkwood, Liberator of Magical Beasts, and Lord of Dragons. As Ryan folded his book and prepared to morph into phoenix form once more, he couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to see this monster kingdom and its legendary ruler up close. Long hidden in the deepest reaches of the Scottish Forbidden Forest, this once glorious kingdom thrived under the guidance of the Hagrids. But as time passed, internal strife fractured their unity. Without a common tongue, magical beasts turned on one another, and the realm fell into ruin. In the wake of its collapse, only a handful of travelers' journals hinted at its existence, and most dismissed them as fanciful legends. One such journal belonged to William Smith, an ancestor of Ryan's, who recorded the kingdom's wonders in vivid detail. He described how, under Hagrid's wise leadership, all the magical creatures abandoned the old practice of hunting each other. Instead, they lived off livestock, cattle, sheep, stoats, mice, and fish, and devoted themselves to farming and animal husbandry. In this way, they fostered an unprecedented harmony that kept meddlesome wizards at bay. Smith wrote that even in his final years, he never forgot the kingdom's greatest day, November 11th, Hagrid's birthday. By the light of a full moon, the moon beasts would gather and dance in the silvered glades. Augury birds, known for their hauntingly clear calls, filled the crisp night air with song. In the sky above, Catalonian fireball dragons performed breathtaking aerial displays. Spiraling through the darkness, they exhaled plumes of flame before bursting into showers of sparks. Down below, horse-shaped water creatures shot jets of spray high enough to snuff out any stray embers, ensuring the festivities blazed safely until dawn. Ryan froze as he stepped between the trees and caught sight of Hogwarts' soaring towers beyond the mist. Scotland at last, and this must be the Forbidden Forest. A shiver ran down his spine. He scanned the clearing and stopped short at the sight of the colossal man leaning against a fallen oak. Could it really be Rubeus Hagrid himself? Old stories spoke of the Hagrid family's uncanny gift, a soothing presence that could silence even the fiercest magical beasts. Where others saw only snarling monstrosities, a Hagrid could discern hidden grace. They had a legendary eye for dragons, too, able to pick out the single most magnificent worm from a clutch that all looked identical to ordinary folk. That beauty, the tales claimed, was not merely a human fancy, but the dragon's own ideal of perfection. It made perfect sense, then, why Hagrid's father fell in love with a giantess. The giants of that region, though massive, were far from savage. Their society flourished, their towers gleamed in mountain passes, and their slow, thoughtful ways spoke of a deep civility. It was in that blood, the marriage of Hagrid's father and the gentle giant, that Rubeus inherited both his size and his gift for companionship with the wildest creatures. Some whisper that the very origin of magical beasts lies in failed transformation magic, wizards experimenting with spells that went awry, turning human into beast, and in the chaos, the afflicted mind warped, giving rise to a new species. Unlike the curse of lycanthropy, which spreads like an infection, these transformations never pass beyond one bloodline. They breed true, generation after generation, each offspring carrying this strange legacy. This lineage, more than any wand or word of power, is what lets Hagrid calm a charging hippogriff or coax a dragon to eat from his hand. And as Ryan watched that gentle giant approach, broomsticks forgotten at his heels, he understood that he was witnessing the very heart of Hogwarts magic come to life. The strongest evidence for this hypothesis comes from the so-called five-legged monsters of Delia, creatures found nowhere else but on Delia, the northernmost island of Scotland. Fiercely hostile and known to prey on anyone who ventures near, they've driven cartographers from the island and left its shores uncharted. Local legend traces these beasts back to the ancient feud between Delia's two wizard families, the McBurns and the McLevers. One ill-fated night, their chieftains, Gint McBurn and Dugald McLever, met for a drunken duel of sorcery. By dawn, Dugald lay dead. Consumed by rage, the McLevers summoned a mass blood curse against the entire McBurn clan. In an instant, every McBurn wizard was transformed into a fiendish creature, a hulking form shrouded in coarse reddish-brown fur, each bearing 5 legs tipped with grotesquely deformed feet. But the McLevers had gravely underestimated their own spell. Within days, the island was overrun by savage, inhuman predators they could neither reason with nor control. Thus the five-legged monsters were born, living proof of a curse born from hatred and folly. For generations, the wizards of the McLever clan had struggled to save their kin among the McBurn. Time and again, they unleashed reversal charms, counter curses, and every restorative ritual they knew, but always the magic failed. Worse still, each attempt seemed only to deepen the curse. The McBurn wizards grew into colossal, mute beasts with 5 jointed legs, their minds consumed by feral madness. They turned on the McLevers in a merciless revolt, slaughtering every man, woman, and child on the island. Even the Ministry's Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, with its best magizoologists and containment specialists, could not touch these creatures. The five-legged horrors resisted every spell cast to restore them. They would not speak, would not remember their past lives, and fought back against any who came too close. Only one wizard possessed the rare gift needed to reach such monsters, Rubeus Hagrid, Hogwarts' keeper of keys and grounds. Through a quiet, heartfelt magic, born of kindness and understanding rather than force, he could stir a creature's buried reason and patience. His greatest success was Aragog, the 8-eyed giant spider. Left wild and ravenous, Aragog might have devoured any human who crossed his path, yet under Hagrid's care, he learned restraint. He could speak in his clicking, rasping way and held to his promise never to harm a person. Hagrid even found Aragog a mate, an untamed female that might otherwise have remained hostile, and gradually tempered the other acromantulas living in the Forbidden Forest, teaching them to obey his gentle commands. Without Hagrid's intervention, Harry Potter and Ron Weasley might well have become spider dinner on more than one occasion. It was that same hope, the hope that Hagrid's unique magic could save the McBurn wizards, that stirred deep curiosity in Ryan Mallory, a third-year student with boundless energy. At dawn one misty morning, Ryan slipped from the castle's shadow, skirted the edge of the Forbidden Forest, and crept toward Hagrid's hut. He was determined to see, for himself, how a single wizard could tame a monster, and perhaps learn whether Hagrid might one day bring the lost McBurn back from their bestial fate. Chapter 27, The Science of the Wand. Ryan had been so impressed by Hagrid's feats that at first he was certain the giant must be descended from some legendary king of monsters. Now, faced with Hagrid's humble wooden cabin, he fought off a creeping sense of boredom. Through the dusty window, he made out a single room hung with curing hams and pheasants. At its center stood a massive table littered with half-eaten ferret sandwiches. In one corner loomed a great, sagging bed covered by a patchwork quilt so ragged it looked ready to fall apart. From the ceiling beams hung an assortment of copper kettles, and draped over one beam was a thick mop of long silvery white hair. On the opposite side, a brazier glowed hot beneath another copper kettle, its water gently steaming. Outside, a neat patch of pumpkins and lentils thrived in the yard. A faded pink floral umbrella leaned against the cabin wall, as if abandoned mid-stroll. By the gate lay a well-oiled crossbow and a pair of rubber overshoes, an oddly luxurious flourish amid the cabin's rustic simplicity. Ryan's eyes settled on that gleaming white hair. He recalled Professor Horace Slughorn's boast in sixth-year potions class: a single strand of unicorn tail hair could fetch 10 galleons. Compare that to Harry's own wand, only 7 galleons from Ollivander's, and the true value of Hagrid's casual ornament became astonishingly clear. Hagrid had discovered that unicorn tail hair was astonishingly strong, so strong in fact that he'd begun using it to bind wounds on injured creatures in his care. But that's only one of its many valuable properties. First and foremost, unicorn hair is a prized ingredient in potion making. Beauty elixirs in particular often call for a strand or two. In Diagon Alley's apothecary, a small vial of processed unicorn tail hair sells for 10 galleons, but don't be fooled by the packaging. A single bag typically contains less hair than what Hagrid can pull from one tail in a single morning. The strands are carefully trimmed, bundled, and presented to look plentiful, but their scarcity is why those potions, and the cosmetics derived from them, command such high prices. Second, unicorn hair is one of the 3 most sought-after wand cores. A wand fitted with unicorn hair yields exceptionally consistent magic, with very few surges or blockages. It also forges an uncommonly loyal bond with its first owner, whether that witch or wizard is prodigiously talented or just beginning to learn their spells. On the downside, these wands aren't particularly well suited to dark arts. They rarely become the most powerful wands available, though of course, the choice of wood can offset some of that limitation. All told, it's easy to see why unicorn tail hair is one of the wizarding world's most versatile and most expensive magical resources. Wands with unicorn tail hair cores are notoriously temperamental. If the bond between wand and wizard isn't carefully nurtured, the hair can grow despondent, its magic effectively dying, and must be replaced. Ryan felt a rush of relief that his own wand didn't rely on tail hair. Even the finest wand wood could only go so far in compensating for a unicorn hair core. It still fell short of the raw power found in wands built around dragon heartstrings or phoenix feathers. No amount of craftsmanship could imitate the fierce strength of a dragon core or the phoenix's resilient spark. Instead, Ollivander had chosen aspen, renowned among wand woods for its balance of flexibility and focus, and paired it with something utterly unprecedented: unicorn heartstrings. According to the research Jack dug up afterward, this very wand dated back to Ollivander's earliest years of practice. So potent was its magic that he had declined several gifted young witches and wizards, deeming them unfit for its power. That alone testified to the wand's extraordinary quality. In the mind of the great wand maker, unicorn hair already ranked alongside dragon heartstrings and phoenix feathers as one of the 3 most magical wand materials. Much like the Fiend, unicorns offered no usable parts save for the hair in their manes and tails, each strand a vessel of ancient, unyielding magic. All wand cores fall into 3 great categories: dragon, unicorn, and phoenix, and each has its own reputation. Dragon parts are prized above all. Every component, from nerve tissue to heartstring, can serve as a potent core. Unicorns, by contrast, embody purity and grace, but most of their bodies carry ancient curses that bind a witch or wizard forever. Only a strand of unicorn hair, chosen for its comparatively mild magic, may be used safely. Phoenix feathers occupy a middle ground. These birds shed their quills freely, so while you can't catch a phoenix, you can gather its feathers wherever they nest. A phoenix feather's power rivals that of a dragon's, and its loyalty is unmatched. Dragons themselves stand at the pinnacle. Their magic is formidable and boundlessly fertile. So prized is dragon blood that, in his youth, Albus Dumbledore undertook detailed studies of its 12 known applications. Pure blood interests, recognizing the creature's value, have long outlawed private dragon breeding. Instead, they maintain a network of state-run dragon farms, chiefly in Romania, to control the stock and the flow of dragon parts. Among all wizards, however, no wand matches the legend of Harry Potter's. When Garrick Ollivander first laid eyes on that little stick of holly, he could hardly set it down again. It measured 11 inches, was remarkably supple, and most mysteriously, harbored a phoenix feather as its core. Holly is one of the rarest wandwoods, prized for its protective qualities, and phoenix feather is the most temperamental of all cores, bonding only to the witch or wizard truly meant for it. As Ryan delved deeper into the lore of wands, he finally understood Ollivander's fascination. In that elegant pairing of holly and phoenix feather, flexible, precise, alive, he recognized not just craftsmanship, but destiny itself. Only witches and wizards of a fundamentally defensive bent, those who strive to master their anger and impatience, who walk the thin line between danger and spiritual pursuit, can truly bond with a holly wand. Hollywood's innate restlessness rarely pairs well with a phoenix feather core. The wood's volatility seems to clash with the feather's lofty detachment. Yet on the rarest of occasions, this unlikely combination does take place, and when it does, the result is a wand of incomparable power, one that bows to no other. Harry Potter exemplifies every quality the Holly-Phoenix pairing demands. Once burdened by an inferiority complex, he learns, over the course of his years at Hogwarts, to harness his emotions, growing in confidence and selflessness. Time and again he proves willing to lay down his life when the moment calls for it. His mastery of the Patronus charm, driving back hundreds of Dementors in a single brilliant surge of light, speaks directly to Holly's defensive strengths. And finally, when he faces Voldemort in their ultimate confrontation, his wand unleashes an unprecedentedly powerful spell, one that at last repels the Dark Lord for good. Here's a polished, idiomatic English version of the passage. One curious belief among wizards holds that holly and oak wands are fundamentally incompatible, so much so that their owners should never become a pair. Hagrid, for instance, carries an oak wand. The superstition traces back to the old notion of the oak as king of the forest from the winter solstice until the summer solstice. Its wood may only be harvested during that span. When the days begin to shorten again, holly takes the throne, and hollywood can only be gathered in the latter half of the year. By this logic, holly and oak stand in opposition, and their wands must never be joined. Since 382 BC, Ollivander's shop has recorded only about a dozen such extraordinary holly-oak pairings, and most pairs have never even met. Mr. Ollivander keeps these wands carefully stored, allowing young witches and wizards to test them only after exhaustive trials to determine knee compatibility. Ironically, this very rarity may help explain why many in the wizarding world give little thought to proper wand lore. For most, a wand that just works is perfectly sufficient. Muggle-born students, however, are often the most willing to seek out Ollivander's expertise from the start, while others choose Ollivander's shop simply because it is universally acknowledged as the finest. Many witches and wizards prefer to shop for second-hand wands, reasoning that the savings can be better spent on potion ingredients, new robes, or other essentials. In fact, most students who skip a trip to Ollivander's simply inherit a wand from a relative. Take Ron Weasley, for example. Growing up in a large, cash-strapped family, he was given his older brother Charlie's unicorn hair wand. Though painstakingly cared for by the Weasleys, the wand's first loyalty belonged to Charlie, and it showed in Ron's halting performance during his first year. Neville Longbottom, too, made do with an inherited wand. He relied on his late father's rather temperamental tool all the way until his 5th year, largely because his overprotective grandmother never arranged for him to get a new one. Even Lucius Malfoy's elegant elm wand, with its dragon heartstring core, wasn't fresh from the shelf. It once belonged to his father, Abraxas Malfoy. Their stories illustrate a simple truth. A perfectly matched wand can change everything. Harry Potter's extraordinary achievements are no accident. His wand chose him, and together they formed an unbreakable bond. Likewise, Neville's early struggles at Hogwarts can be traced back to a wand that never truly meshed with him. Only after the climactic battle at the end of Order of the Phoenix, when Neville's battered wand finally snapped, did he visit Ollivander on the eve of his 6th year. There, at last, he found a wand that was truly his own. Interestingly, this was the last wand Ollivander sold before Voldemort abducted him, a cherrywood wand with a unicorn tail hair core. Chapter 28. Classification. A sniffer burst from a burrow in the earth, its sudden arrival shattering Ryan's concentration. Not far away, Hagrid tugged on his rubber boots, lifted the heavy stone bough resting against the doorway, and strode into the shadowed depths of the forbidden forest. Yaya followed hesitantly, her steps light on the leaf-strewn path, while the thestrals that had gathered around them melted back into the gloom. Ryan had no intention of making himself known. Although he had taken on the outward form of a phoenix, he still lacked the creature's innate grace and mannerisms. Confronting Hagrid, Hogwarts' resident expert on magical beasts, would only risk exposure. Besides, today's purpose had already been fulfilled. Is this fate? Ryan wondered as he watched Hagrid's broad figure vanish among the ancient trunks. Through his heightened magical senses, he felt the forest respond, its ambient magic rising in a silent cheer, as if celebrating the arrival of its rightful heir. Then, as quietly as a dying ember, Ryan slipped away. Having grown accustomed to his phoenix shape, he no longer needed the windless blaze that once marked his presence. The edge of the forbidden forest fell back into stillness, as though nothing at all had happened. Ryan's thoughts snapped back to Hogwarts Castle as he considered the simplest approach: forgo the flashy sound-dampening effects and just cast a little extra power. True, a wizard could use apparition to cancel the crackle of magical energy, but that spell is meant for teleportation. Why drain more power and risk miscasting or even splitting yourself apart? He found himself admiring Hagrid all over again. With nothing more than a humble affinity for animals, the half-giant managed to care for, and in many cases command, an entire menagerie of magical beasts. It was a deceptively modest talent that underpinned the safety of every creature on the grounds. What really surprised Ryan was discovering Hagrid's true prowess: charms at level 4. That wasn't a casual ranking. Most ministry officials and average aurors struggled to hit that mark. Some couldn't even sustain a third-level spell. Level 4 places Hagrid solidly above competent. Level 5, on the other hand, was rare. Ryan had felt that power once, on Rufus Scrimgeour during his short stint as minister. No wonder he replaced Fudge. Scrimgeour possessed both the authority and the skill. To Ryan, charms were the bedrock of wizardry, straightforward, reliable, and indispensable. Compared with Transfiguration, which he regarded as so fiendishly complex that it hardly felt like a single spell, charms were the truest measure of a wizard's finesse. Defense against the dark arts is at its core simply the study of spells used to combat dark magic. Ryan, using both his investigative talents and the spell-level readouts from the panel, drafted his own classification. He found that disciplines like Transfiguration or Potions were harder to quantify, but pure spellcasting fell neatly into 6 tiers. 1. Level 1, Novice. You can just barely cast a spell correctly. This is the proficiency of a first-year Hogwarts student. 2. Level 2, Skilled. Spells are cast cleanly and accurately, with well-pronounced incantations. This matches the second- or third-year Hogwarts curriculum. 3. Level 3, Advanced. Your willpower allows you to perform silent casting, essentially the standard for 4th and 5th-year students. 4. Level 4, Expert. You've developed your own nuanced understanding of curses and charms, the level typically reached by 6th and 7th-year pupils. 5. Level 5, Master. Reserved for those with exceptional talent. Ordinary wizards must devote many years of intense study and practice to attain this rank. 6. Level 6, Genius. A realm accessible only to true prodigies. Even the most dedicated practitioners rarely scratch the surface without a lifetime of hard work, serendipity, and sudden insight. With this framework, Ryan set a clear benchmark for evaluating any witch or wizard spellcasting ability. Note that when we speak of students' levels in Charms or Transfiguration, Level 3 or Level 4, we're referring only to the particular spells and exercises taught in class and practiced throughout the term, not to their overall magical ability. In fact, the vast majority of Hogwarts graduates leave with little more than Level 3 proficiency in Charms. Achieving Level 4 is exceptionally rare. Only those who dedicate themselves wholeheartedly to the study of magic ever raise their general standard. Others may learn a handful of advanced, Level 4 spells and earn a reputation as dueling virtuosos, but in truth, their everyday repertoire remains at Level 3. This helps explain Hagrid's apparent inconsistencies with magic. In the original books, he cast spells on more than one occasion, yet he's long been wandless. In his 3rd year, the Ministry confiscated and forcibly broke his wand following Voldemort's accusations. Officially, a snapped wand is irreparable. Still, Hagrid never seemed entirely cut off. He simply concealed the shattered pieces inside his trademark pink umbrella. For the record, bright pastel colors aren't exclusive to witches. Wizarding wardrobes often differ wildly from Muggle fashion. And of course, one might argue that Hagrid's occasional success owes something to Dumbledore's own mastery, for the headmaster wields the Elder Wand, one of the 3 legendary Deathly Hallows. Magic can be astonishingly potent. In the original series, Harry Potter's Holly Wand was shattered and declared dead, yet, as the master of the Elder Wand, he simply uttered a repair charm, and the Holly Wand sprang back to life. The same hidden power explains Rubeus Hagrid's battered old wand. Though it looked splintered and beyond use, Hagrid managed to cast spells with it because Albus Dumbledore quietly repaired it again and again. Even after his expulsion in 3rd year, Hagrid never gave up on learning magic. Having grown up within the ancient spell-rich walls of Hogwarts, he absorbed whatever magic remained in the castle's stones. Whenever his duties as gamekeeper permitted, he slipped down to the library to borrow books on charms and creature care. On occasion, Dumbledore himself would arrange private lessons, tutoring Hagrid in the astronomy tower or in his own office. Hagrid never took his owls, not for lack of ability, but for lack of focus. His true passion lay in studying magical beasts. In fact, his understanding of magical creatures rivals the competence expected of a 5th-year student, even if his transfiguration never advanced past 3rd-year standards. Contrary to popular rumor, Voldemort's machinations had nothing to do with Hagrid's expulsion. He was, in many ways, a more reckless prototype of Newt Scamander, brilliant with creatures but perpetually courting danger. During his student years, Hagrid routinely raised a litter of young werewolves beneath his cabin floorboards and once ventured alone into the Forbidden Forest to drive off a troll invasion. By the time the authorities caught up with him, Hogwarts officials had no choice but to wipe his academic record clean and bar him from classes. Yet the castle would not, and could not, let him go entirely. Instead, he was hired as keeper of keys and grounds, where he continues to learn and teach magic in his own unforgettable way. Rubeus Hagrid had always been something of a walking disaster, much to the perpetual frustration of the Hogwarts headmaster. In his 3rd year, Hagrid's impulsiveness reached new heights when he managed to raise an acromantula, a man-eating 5th-level magical creature. According to the Ministry of Magic's Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, every beast, specter, and even certain humans is assigned one of 5 danger levels. These classifications offer wizards an immediate sense of the threat they face. XXXXX, creatures known to kill wizards, impossible to tame or domesticate. XXX, highly dangerous beings requiring specialized knowledge and the skill of expert witches or wizards to handle. XXX, beasts and N, titties that competent magic users can manage safely. X, harmless creatures that can be domesticated. X, mildly annoying creatures posing little real danger. By daring to keep a giant, venomous spider in his care, Hagrid had always skirted the boundaries of acceptable magical practice, and this time he crossed the line. The headmaster's decision to expel him wasn't primarily about the later tragedy involving the Chamber of Secrets or the death of Myrtle, as rumors would have it. It was Hagrid's pattern of reckless behavior and the undeniable risk it posed to everyone at Hogwarts that sealed his fate. In one stroke, the school removed a continual headache and quelled the growing fear that more students might become victims of a creature no one could hope to control. Ryan had been watching Hagrid's steady progress in charms for years, and the evidence was clear. Living at Hogwarts offered a remarkable advantage. By Ryan's calculations, spellcasting at the school proceeded about 10% faster, and it was that much easier to get started. In short, practicing at Hogwarts provided a powerful buff, and for someone like Ryan, who was already something of a prodigy, it could be explosive. Even if the ancient castle lacked lingering traces of the darkest curses, there was no guarantee of enough residue from something as rare as Avada Kedavra. Common spells abounded. Fire spells like Incendio and water charms such as Aguamenti were practically woven into the walls and corridors. That must be why Hogwarts's textbooks had remained largely unchanged for decades. Newer editions had appeared over the years, only to flounder when students found themselves unable to keep up. The school quietly reverted to the tried-and-true volumes, especially in the spellwork classes. That settled it. Ryan would slip into Hogwarts and train in secret. Thanks to the Phoenix method of apparition he'd mastered, he could bypass the usual anti-apparition wards. There was a secluded glade in the Forbidden Forest, undiscovered by staff and students alike, where he could practice undisturbed. He packed his wand and a couple of essential textbooks, then faded into the blink of silver light. When he rematerialized on the edge of the forest, the castle's silhouette rose before him, its windows glowing warmly against the dusk sky. Beyond those walls lay everything he needed: endless magical residue, hallowed halls, and the perfect opportunity to push his powers to the limit. Tonight, the real tutoring would begin. Thanks to the Phoenix's all-around 365-degree vision and unmatched reconnaissance skills, there's no way anyone could sneak up on me. It couldn't possibly be that Dumbledore sent the bird here. Chapter 29, Avada Eats a Big Melon. I'll have to put that plan on hold until after Christmas. I'm meeting Penelope and Kate in Hogsmeade on Christmas Day, and once the holiday break begins, most of the students will have left Hogwarts. It'll be the perfect, quiet time to carry out my investigation. Jack, Master Ryan, are you hungry? Jack's familiar voice drifted over. A bit, I admitted with a grin. Let's have noodles for breakfast today. Take your time. No need to worry about anything else. Moments later, a steaming bowl of fragrant beef noodles was set before me. I picked up my slender chopsticks, paused for a second, and found my thoughts wandering to a rather fascinating subject: the Elder Wand. It had been Voldemort's final acquisition before his death, and one of the legendary Deathly Hallows. In fact, two of those Hallows had played direct roles in Voldemort's downfall. The first was the Resurrection Stone. Its mysterious connection to Harry's blood had allowed Harry to survive Voldemort's killing curse a second time, setting the stage for the Dark Lord's ultimate defeat. The second was the Elder Wand itself. Dumbledore's masterstroke had been his plan to die undefeated, thereby becoming the wand's true and final owner. I lifted a mouthful of noodles, savoring the rich broth, and considered how these legendary artifacts might tie into my own quest. Chapter 12. The Wand and the Sword. If everything goes according to plan, the Elder Wand's power will die with Voldemort. No one ever defeated him to claim ownership. An Elder Wand only changes hands when its current master is defeated. Had that rule not held, Snape might have become its true master after killing Dumbledore. Instead, it was Draco Malfoy who, quite by accident, disarmed Dumbledore and thus unwittingly became the wand's new master. Later, at Malfoy Manor, Harry Potter overcame Draco, seizing control of the Elder Wand himself. Yet in the final duel, Voldemort, unaware of this shift in allegiance, wielded the very wand he believed he owned to cast Avada Kedavra at Harry. The curse rebounded upon him, and once again, it was Voldemort who fell victim to the killing curse he himself had unleashed. During his studies, Ryan uncovered another startling secret. The Sword of Gryffindor functions much like a second Elder Wand, or perhaps a faithful replica. This blade grows stronger by absorbing powerful magical substances, much as the Elder Wand accumulates potency when it overcomes foes. The sword's creator, Godric Gryffindor, appears to be linked to the legendary elder brother of the Deathly Hallows, who met an untimely death in his youth. There may even be a deeper connection with Salazar Slytherin, the house founder tied to the second brother's tale. Ancient records reveal that Godric relied on his enchanted sword far more often than on any wand. Under the right conditions, the Sword of Gryffindor can become as formidable and perhaps as coveted as the Elder Wand itself. With these revelations in hand, Ryan now faces a choice: safeguard this newfound knowledge or risk plunging the wizarding world into yet another conflict over ultimate power. Neville's decisive stroke severed Nagini's head, Voldemort's last Horcrux. For so long, the Great Serpent had been more than a beast, a tormented witch, stripped of humanity and memory by that ancient blood curse. With her death, Voldemort's soul was finally laid bare. Ryan watched it all with a mixture of relief and calculation. After all, the prophecy spoke only of two chosen children, Harry and Neville. But if both should fail, its fate would fall to him. In that moment, he would claim the Black Knight, a faithful replica, refined and enhanced by his father, George Smith, from the Elder Wand's legend. And the invisibility cloak, which had saved Harry countless times, would pass to Neville if Neville proved triumphant where Harry had not. Should Neville fall as well, Then the mantle of savior would pass at last to Ryan Smith, bearer of wand and cloak alike. In Ryan's mind, the three deathly hollow, Wes, along with their meticulously crafted replicas, and the intertwined blood of the three Peverell brothers, formed the backbone of the prophecy. Everything hinged on mastery of those artifacts and the power they represented. That evening, after dinner, Ryan slipped into the kitchen to commence a long-planned experiment. With the low hum of spells vibrating against the old stone walls, he raised his wand and chanted softly, "Avada Kedavra! Feast upon this, my hefty friend." A sudden flash of emerald light illuminated the room, brighter than any hearth fire. In an instant, the pig destined for supper collapsed, lifeless, serene, as though it had never suffered a moment's pain. Ryan lowered his wand, eyes shining. This was only the beginning. He was refining his own lethal application of the killing curse, testing its limits, and preparing, should fate decree it, to step into the prophecy himself. Indeed, unlike in the original version, Ryan never had to force himself into a killing frenzy. He simply embraced the mantle of death incarnate. In the mindset of a lord over the dead, he saw all life as a disease and carried the elixir of death to every living soul. Under that grim conviction, his Avada Kedavra soared to what felt like level 5, perhaps even level 6, the very ceiling of wizarding power. Only level 7 lay beyond, in the domain of true gods. But that peak proved fleeting. In truth, Ryan's death curse magic remained at levels 4 to 5. Yes, his innate talent let him briefly reproduce 6th level force, but it was nothing more than a shortcut. His core ability hadn't grown. It was much like his phoenix incarnation. He might cheat to borrow the legendary bird's power, but the spell itself still demanded personal mastery to advance. Any borrowed strength only aids your growth once your genuine skill has nearly caught up to it. And yet this borrowed might was not wasted. The glimpse of power granted by his eternal proof talent became a beacon for his own magic. Now that he'd seen what was possible, it was only a matter of time before Ryan's true death curse prowess reached, and perhaps even surpassed, that temporary high. My theory was right. Ryan only dared to study and experiment with the killing curse once he'd broken free of the witch's collective mindset and guaranteed his own immortality through the phoenix incarnation. The very words, Avada Kedavra, translate roughly as, "Let this thing be destroyed," a literal command to obliterate one's target. What made Ryan's breakthrough so extraordinary was the shift in his own thinking. At the moment he uttered the words, he abandoned every trace of his personal identity and fully assumed the role of death incarnate. Without that altered mindset, he would have been forced to rely entirely on the magic interface, trialing and retrialing the spell until sheer repetition achieved success. Thanks to his L4 spell mastery ability, Ryan could elevate any newly learned spell directly to level 4. But even more astonishing, he pushed the killing curse beyond its normal limits, upgrading it to level 5. In the entire history of wizardkind, no genius, no matter how talented, had ever attained that level of mastery in a single lifetime. Yet Ryan did it in one bold, final experiment. Ryan had even mastered level 6 reproduction, a discipline demanding rigorous study, innate talent, and a measure of luck. He remembered a mechanic from a mobile game he'd played before crossing over, stacking death curses to amplify their effect. Just the thought of it made him wince. Without his system backing him up, he'd never dare attempt anything so perilous. To Ryan, altering someone's thought patterns was far more terrifying than outright possession. He believed that personality comprised every memory a person had ever experienced, each recollection indispensable, each fragment of the past too precious to lose. In his view, personality surpassed even the soul in value. Perhaps this conviction was why his skill had evolved into a near-photographic memory, able to unearth every buried impression, a nenial, obscure detail. That ability had been his saving grace. Without it, repeatedly revisiting the source material might have swelled his pride, and any forgotten nuance could have sprung a trap he wouldn't see coming. Ryan hadn't truly understood himself until the last of his memories returned. In piecing together who he was as Zhou Yi and who he had become as Ryan Smith, he finally saw his strengths and weaknesses laid bare, and for the first time, he accepted them both. No amount of coin could have bought that kind of insight, and it proved invaluable in his study of magic. True mastery, he realized, begins with knowing yourself. The secret lay in the panel, the mysterious interface that guided him like a silent tutor. With its help, every flaw in his technique vanished almost overnight. Faced with unfamiliar spells, he simply focused on the panel's prompts, precise incantation, exact mana flow, and the answers appeared as if by instinct. It was the dream of every aspiring wizard, the raw curiosity of youth fused with the practiced skill of an elder. No traditional school of sorcery could rival his progress. Yet even this gift had its limits. There were arcane chains so deeply woven into the fabric of magic that even the panel could not break them for him. In the old records, especially in the tale of the Dark Lord, Ryan discovered how Voldemort had freed himself long ago, by slaughtering every wizard who stood in his way. Bloodshed had been the key to his power. Ryan shivered at the memory. If he wanted to cast off the same restraints, he knew violence would lead him down a dark path. He refused to become a monster, no matter the power it granted. So he vowed to find another way, one that honored the values he cherished and spared innocent lives. With that resolve burning in his chest, Ryan stepped forward into a future of his own making, confident that true freedom lay not in broken chains, but in unbroken principles. Chapter 30. Checking for omissions and filling the gaps. Ryan sat frozen, surprise rippling through him. Voldemort had begun killing wizards as early as his 5th year at Hogwarts? The man who later became the most notorious dark wizard in history had, out of fear of losing his only home, unwittingly taken a life and felt his own powers surge. That victim was Myrtle, and what had always struck Harry, and every reader, as a tragic accident at the hands of a basilisk, suddenly felt far more deliberate. Could this incident have been the catalyst for Tom Riddle's later murders? Had the shock of that first death driven him to split his soul and create the very first Horcrux? Ryan blinked, as if waking from a dream. All his knowledge of this world had come from Harry Potter's perspective in J.K. Rowling's 7 novels. Harry believed, as did most of us, that Hogwarts was Voldemort's emotional anchor, his home above all else. Even after Dumbledore's death, the school continued to function. Students like Neville Longbottom staged rebellions without Voldemort unleashing wholesale cruelty. Yes, Snape's protective oversight played a part, but surely the Dark Lord, who claimed the castle as his stronghold, must have known everything that transpired within its walls. Perhaps Harry had given Voldemort too much credit for restraint. Myrtle's death had not been a random accident. It had been a calculated move in a much darker scheme. Ryan closed his eyes and let the implications settle. He was peering into the true heart of Voldemort's rise, far sooner, far colder, and far more ruthless than he had ever imagined. Hogwarts has always held profound meaning for both Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort. But how could Voldemort possibly resist the lure of immortality? In the years before the Chamber of Secrets was first opened, Moaning Myrtle was about as unpopular in Ravenclaw as a ghost could be. Unlike Luna Lovegood's gentle spirit, Myrtle refused to rise above insults. Every time someone slighted her, she'd flee to the old girl's bathroom and drown her sorrows in tears. It was precisely this bathroom, haunted, hidden, and seldom frequented, that Voldemort would later designate as the entrance to Salazar Slytherin's secret chamber. When Tom Riddle discovered the ritual for creating Horcruxes, he needed a suitably tragic murder to infuse his first piece of soul into an object. The Chamber of Secrets had been sealed for decades, but reopening it was as simple for him as slipping a Parseltongue command through a snake's gape. At the same time, Hagrid, then a shy third-year student, had begun raising a colony of acromantulas on the grounds. Those monstrous spiders were despised by everybody, and for Riddle they were the perfect cover, a clandestine lair, a lone victim, and monstrous creatures to terrify the witnesses into silence. Given the convergence of opportunity, location, and candidate, why didn't Voldemort sacrifice Myrtle herself? After all, she was already a miserable, forgotten soul sobbing in that very bathroom. Yet Lord Voldemort chose a different path, one that bound his fate ever more tightly to Hogwarts. He lured Ginny Weasley into the chamber, using her tears and the diary he'd enchanted as both bait and conduit. The irony grows deeper if you remember Riddle's birth name, Tom Marvolo Riddle. Tom honored his Muggle father, Tom Riddle Sr., and Marvolo came from his maternal grandfather, Marvolo Gaunt. When he anagrammed Tom Marvolo Riddle into I am Lord Voldemort, he chose a name with a chilling pedigree. In French, vol means theft or flight, and mort means death. Combined, Voldemort can be read as flight from death, or theft of death, a fitting banner for a man who would stop at nothing to elude his mortality. Could a soul so disciplined, so driven by ambition, really resist the simplest, most direct path to eternal life? If you judge only by Harry's account, you might think so. After all, Harry Potter never trusted anything that smacked of Slytherin cunning. But our world is more complex than Gryffindor heroics or Slytherin scheming. Even the darkest wizard must sometimes choose between the tools of destiny and the very risks that could ensnare him forever. If I stay on guard like this, I may protect myself with my own strength. But what about Ryan? He could do something that clashes entirely with my sense of right and wrong. That thought won't leave me alone. Take Pansy Parkinson, for example. You've probably heard her dubbed Poodle Pansy. Is she really that hideous? After all, Draco Malfoy chose her as his dance partner at the Yule Ball. Surely he wouldn't have asked someone truly repellent. Still, everyone treats her like a joke. Hermione Granger herself sneered, "She's a total cow. Prefect? She's dumber than a concussion-addled mountain troll." And then there was the Battle of Hogwarts. When Voldemort promised he'd spare every student if Harry Potter were handed over, Pansy climbed onto a table in the Great Hall, pointed right at him, and shrieked, "There he is. Potter's here. Someone, catch him." No surprise, she was the very first to be hauled away by Professor McGonagall and Filch. Even J.K. Rowling has disowned her. In one interview, when asked which character from the Philosopher's Stone she'd most like to be, she said, "Hermione, definitely, but not Pansy Parkinson." The author herself admitted Pansy was a character she couldn't stand. And it's telling that after courting Draco for a time, Pansy was unceremoniously dumped in the end. Draco Malfoy had already chosen his bride, Astoria Greengrass, a Slytherin 2 years his junior. Well, boys do tend to prefer younger girls, don't they? Harry himself eventually married Ginny, who was a year younger than he was. Even now, 4 years later, I still make a point of paying them a visit. After all, I've taken it upon myself to give every beautiful witch a home and spare her a tragic fate, I tell myself with righteous conviction. I was lost in these thoughts when a sharp voice cut through my reverie. "Master, it's time to go to St. Mungo's Hospital," Jack announced, appearing at my elbow with perfect posture and an air of respect. This visit had long been part of my plan. I wanted to master healing magic, and in our world, St. Mungo's owns that domain. Sure, Hogwarts offers a handful of simple healing charms, but they're never formally taught. Harry himself complained about it in his later years. Only students with parents in the medical or dental professions, like Hermione, ever managed to pick up those spells on their own. My own talent for magic is considerable, so I'm not heading to St. Mungo's in need of basic instruction. What I seek is immersion in the hospital's potent, ever-present wellspring of healing enchantments. There's no better place to absorb that raw magical energy, and that's exactly why we're going today. The pace of their progress felt extraordinary, as though in this environment they were covering 1,000 miles of learning every single day. Then, with a familiar crack, Ryan and Jack apparated from the training rooms to central London, arriving in front of Tao Tao & Co., an old, unassuming department store. Behind it rose the stately spires of St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. It wasn't a coincidence that the two buildings stood back to back. Both belonged to the Smith Corporation. When the Smiths discovered that Diagon Alley simply lacked the space, and that an underground hospital, like the Ministry of Magic, wasn't feasible, they quietly purchased Tao Tao & Co., and a second, little-known store adjoining it. Planted among the hustle and bustle of Muggle London, the site offered sick or injured witches and wizards a low-key way to step directly from everyday life into expert care. Just as the leaky cauldron hides its entrance to Diagon Alley, Tao Tao & Co. conceals a secret passage leading straight into St. Mungo's admissions hall. There's no need to telephone ahead. Patients browse the upper floors for that perfect wand polish or cauldron liner, then slip through an enchanted doorway and check in. St. Mungo's itself rises 6 floors. Above the passageway, 1. First floor, accident department, all mechanical, magical apparatus, and general injury cases. Second floor, biological injuries department, flesh wounds, bites, stings, and the like. Third floor, exotic infections wing, strange bacteria, rare fungi, and magical contagions. Fourth floor, pharmacy and phytotoxicology, prescriptions, potions, and plant poison treatments. Fifth floor, curses and hex damage department, straightening out jinxed limbs, dispelling lingering hexes. Sixth floor, tea room and hospital shop, herbal teas, light refreshments, and magical one-off merchandise. Ryan and Jack exchanged a quick nod. Their next lesson awaited, this time among the wards of Britain's finest magical hospital. On the first floor, a large portrait of Delise Derwent, headmistress of Hogwarts, hangs above the reception desk. A witch in emerald robes sits there, politely directing each patient to the proper ward for treatment. Smith's secret passageway emerges on the sixth floor, hidden behind a solitary tea room that no one ever visits. Disguised by a polyjuice spell to look like the famed healer George Smith, Ryan and Jack slip inside. They push through the heavy oaken door and find themselves in a small sitting room dominated by a plush, moss-green couch. All around it stand pots of elder herbs whose fragrant leaves brush the low ceiling. Directly opposite the couch is a wall of one-way glass. Beyond it lies an enclosed greenhouse that feels more like a tropical rainforest than a hospital annex. Towering ferns, orchids with jewel-bright petals, and vines heavy with blossoms form a living tapestry. Through the glass, robed figures drift between the foliage. Their deep green cloaks bear a curious badge, a cross made from interlaced wands and bone, and they examine the plants with clinical detachment, paying no heed to the two newcomers. Jack settles onto the edge of the couch and nods toward a large clay pot tucked in the corner. "Give that a nudge," he whispers to Ryan, "and the illusion will break. Then, the healers on the other side will notice we've got a patient who needs help." If he watered it, the therapists would immediately suspect someone was in the room. Ryan raised a hand, silently telling Jack to back off, then settled into his own practice. He'd done his homework before coming here, so swallowing his embarrassment was easier this time around. Still, chanting mantras in a place where staff members drifted in and out proved far more daunting than he'd expected. Chapter 31, Christmas. December 25th had arrived before Ryan even noticed. Christmas Day and the end of his practicum at St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries. In just a few weeks, his healing charms had improved by leaps and bounds, thanks both to his own burgeoning level 4 spellwork and the hospital's inspiring atmosphere. He closed his spellbook with a satisfied smile. St. Mungo's had been the perfect place to refine his craft. He had a date that evening. Penelope and Kate would meet him at Mrs. Puttief's tea house at 6 o'clock. Famous for its plum cakes and steaming mugs of spiced cider, Mrs. Puttief's was already hung with holly and mistletoe, every window glowing golden in the winter dusk. It felt good to look forward to a night of laughter and warmth. But first, one last patient. A piglet whose wounds were slated for the kitchen before Ryan volunteered to help. In the tidy exam room, he raised his wand and spoke the healing incantation. Under his careful magic, the reddened gashes along the creature's side closed up, flesh knitting together as smoothly and swiftly as a rolling tide. Moments later, the piglet bounded away, unharmed and oblivious to the crisis it had narrowly escaped. "Just like before," Ryan murmured, straightening his robes. He tucked his wand away and prepared to leave. St. Mungo's was the right decision. A sudden breeze rattled the windows, carrying a chill that wasn't quite of this world. The hallway lanterns flickered, and Ryan felt a familiar pull in his core, a whisper in his blood. The call of time, echoing across dimensions, had come for him once again. His heart pounded as scarlet magic flared to life, wreathed around him in flickering sparks. Wind roared through the corridors, papers flying, lanterns clattering. Ryan's expression flickered between excitement and sorrow. Then, in an instant, the world blurred and dissolved. Wherever, whenever he would emerge next, his Christmas night was far from over. He drew in a slow breath, tasting the mingled chill warmth of the phoenix feathers aflame with Goobler fairy fire. The contrast sparked a fire in his chest, and the phoenix sigil there blazed with a sacred red glow. In his mind, Jack the house elf spoke softly. "Master, your outfit is ready. Shall I bring it now?" Ryan paused a heartbeat before answering out loud, "I'll bathe first. Have it waiting for me afterward." Wordlessly, he pushed open the practice room door and stepped into the gallery, where twin braziers of Goobler fairy fire cast dancing shadows along the walls. At the far end stood his newest invention, an elevator polished to a deep, metallic black. He tapped the button for the first floor. The doors slid open, and immediately opposite lay the private bathing suite, its walls decorated with an enchanted mural of mermaids reclining and beckoning with mischievous grins. Ryan paid them no heed. He knelt, drew the steaming water, and eased himself into the tub. As the heat closed around him, he let his thoughts drift free. No plans, no worries, only the soothing hush of the bath. Time slipped away until, when at last he surfaced, the clock on the wall read exactly 5 p.m. Race, wizard. Strength 19, normal human limit 10. Constitution 31, normal human limit 10. Magic power 26, normal human limit. Skills, thinking level 4, 21%. Body transformation level 4 to 2%. Alchemy level 24%. Charms level 4. Potions 21%. Transfiguration 6%. Magical biology level gunfighting 5%. Martial arts level investigation level 49%. Phoenix incarnation level 121%. Mind communication level 0.1, 44%. This time, Ryan apparated straight into Hogsmeade Village, materializing on High Street just outside Fenya's Wizarding Apparel, the shop owned by Smith. Along this busy thoroughfare stood the Literati Quill Shop, the post office, Zonko's Joke Shop, the Three Broomsticks, Honeydukes, the Hog's Head, and looming on the outskirts, the eerie Shrieking Shack. Without hesitation, Ryan slipped through Hotch Fenya's side door and melted into the holiday crowd. The village was alive with returning students. Their laughter and excited chatter carried on the crisp air. Wand tips peeked from over scarves, and festive scarves flew behind cloaks as young witches and wizards darted from shop to shop. Ryan allowed himself a small smile. After weeks of planning and preparation, he'd arrived exactly where he needed to be, right in the heart of Hogsmeade, at the most magical time of the year. Ryan stepped into Mrs. Puttief's tea house, clad in a white, gold-trimmed wizard's robe, his face almost entirely hidden beneath its pointed hat so that only his keen eyes showed. Tonight's festival had drawn third-year and above wizarding couples into this snug, pastel-pink cafe. The air was warm and fragrant, every surface draped in ruffles or tied with bows. Beside each round table stood a miniature evergreen Christmas tree, and the little snowman perched atop occasionally showered delighted patrons with flakes of white confetti. Having made an appointment in advance, Ryan gave a polite nod to the plump proprietor, Mrs. Puttief, and took the corner seat she'd reserved for him. From inside his robes he produced a single book, A Year with the XZ Snowman. Unlike all the others on display, his copy's cover no longer bore Lockhart's smug portrait. Only a fluffy, friendly-looking snowman remained. It was the perfect addition for a snowy evening of magic studies, and frankly, Ryan was relieved to see Lockhart's irritating grin banished. 15 minutes later, the warm haze of the tea house parted to reveal the very wizard he'd hoped to avoid. Gilderoy Lockhart stood near the center of the room, wand aloft, chanting in that self-important drawl. At his feet loomed a towering, snarling snowman, its coal-black eyes blazing with malevolence. With a dramatic flick, Lockhart unleashed his mysterious XZ magic, binding the monstrous creature in shimmering chains of ice until it clattered to a harmless heap of frozen cobblestones. A hush fell over the cafe as the last of the snowman's threats melted away. All eyes turned to Lockhart, whose triumphant smile filled the room once more. And despite himself, Ryan felt a flicker of grudging admiration before his expression settled back into polite neutrality. After all, the cover of his book might lack Lockhart's face, but the man's flair for showmanship remained unmistakable. Despite its absurdities, Ryan could still recognize the serious elements that undoubtedly belonged to the original account of the master's operation. He closed the book and looked up as a familiar magical aura approached. Two cloaked figures, Penello and Kate, strolled toward him. The shorter figure in the blue robe bounded forward and waved enthusiastically. That must be Kate. Strangely, Ryan had never sensed her magic, or even her footsteps, until she was almost on top of him. Was she simply too small to register? Standing beside her, Penello in her green wizard's robes picked up the black tea Ryan had ordered. She poured a cup for Kate, who accepted it with a casual nod. Kate took a swift sip, then, without missing a beat, snatched a green bean cake from the plate and devoured it in one go. It's still piping hot, Penelo," Kate declared, her cheeks bulging. "This is delicious." Penelo merely raised her own teacup, took a quiet sip, and offered a polite smile. "Ryan," Penelo said, frowning as she set down her tea, "last time you mentioned the 3 key principles of healing magic. I've been thinking about them, but there's one aspect I still don't understand." Ryan leaned back in his chair and regarded her thoughtfully. "It all comes down to your mindset." Ryan leaned forward, gently clasping Penelope's small hand. "Think of yourself as the patient's own therapist," he said, flipping to a plate of the book Simple Spells for Healing Wounds. "The more vividly you imagine the injury, the more effective your healing will be. The text here is straightforward, but these illustrations are priceless." He tapped the detailed sketches of the a mouse curse wound. Kate, standing nearby, puffed out her cheeks and tore into a pastry as if it were revenge on her boredom. After a few moments, the Ravenclaw stepped closer, curiosity winning out. Penelope offered razor-sharp insights, and Kate's wildly creative theories bounced off the pages. They gave Ryan fresh angles he'd never encountered in any textbook. He relished the unpredictable spark each of them brought to the discussion. Between annotations on healing charms, they shared stories of their daily mishaps. Kate teased Penelope about her morning blunder, straying into the wrong bathroom and getting drenched courtesy of Moaning Myrtle's latest tantrum. Laughter punctuated each new anecdote. All around them, the little cafe had filled with whispering couples, entwined hands, and stolen kisses. Amid the murmur of flirtations, Ryan, Penelope, and Kate huddled in their corner, poring over magical wounds. They felt like outsiders in a realm of romance. Ryan couldn't help but wonder why Penelope had chosen this love-struck tea house for their study session, but as the laughter and lively debate continued, he was glad she had. Suddenly, cool and warm lips brushed against Ryan's cheek. He stood frozen, yet he didn't want to pull away. "It's late. Time to get back to the Christmas party," Penelope whispered, her ears tinged pink. With a playful grin, Kate hid her eyes behind her hands and followed her friend out. Ryan remained rooted to the spot, watching as snow-white confetti drifted down around the exact place Penelope had kissed him. He let out a soft laugh, reached for the tea house door, he'd already settled the bill, and slipped into the night. A single question kept drifting through his mind. Was this a step forward? Was this what it felt like to fall in love? On his way home, Ryan's heart felt impossibly light. The magic of that moment surged through him like warm champagne, bubbling up until he couldn't stop smiling. The next morning, he visited the training grounds and gasped. The once withered flowers were in full bloom again, and fresh green shoots peppered the grass. It was as if the world itself had been stirred by his newfound happiness. Penelope, who had begun merely as his subject in studying the magic of love, had quietly claimed a place in his heart. And Ryan, alive with youthful wonder, couldn't wait to see where this new path would lead them both. Chapter 32. Killing the Spider. The next morning, Ryan settled into his study and reread Penelope's letter. There was nothing alarming, just a handful of advanced magical questions, phrased so innocuously he half wondered why she'd bothered writing them down at all. What caught his attention was her postscript. She hadn't returned to Hogwarts yesterday as planned, but had gone straight from Hogsmeade Station back home for the Christmas holiday. A quick realization flickered through his mind. It must have been deliberate. He set the letter aside, picked up his quill, and composed detailed yet succinct answers to each of Penelope's questions. At the bottom of the parchment, he added a few warm holiday wishes. Handing the missive to Jack, his longtime house elf, he instructed him to summon an owl and dispatch the reply at once. Breakfast was a quiet affair, just fresh fruit, a wedge of cheese, and a cup of strong tea, after which Ryan changed into traveling robes. Today he planned to return to the Forbidden Forest at Hogwarts, this time in person. He'd meant to scout the forest yesterday, but an unforeseen turn of events, though intriguing, had kept him occupied until nightfall. It mattered little. He'd explored Hogwarts many times before, especially during his Phoenix excursions. What he sought was a part of the forest that saw almost no traffic, hidden away on the castle's western flank. There were 3 such spots, each notorious among Hogwarts staff for their eerie silence and near impenetrable thickets. Any of them could harbor the creature he intended to confront. With his satchel slung over one shoulder and wand secured at his belt, Ryan stepped from his study into the crisp December air. The first rays of winter sunlight glinted off the castle's ancient towers as he made his way toward the forbidden forest, determination guiding each stride. Today, he would leave no stone unturned and no spider unspidered. Centaur territory. The Centaur's enclave lies pressed up against the sheer rock face of the back mountain, a natural bulwark few dare to challenge. As one of the Forbidden Forest's largest populations, these proud creatures patrol their borders with deadly precision, favoring bows and arrows that can pin down even the swiftest prey. The mountain's steep, moss-slick wall discourages all but the smallest flyers. Only tiny shield birds, capable of short-range teleportation, can flit about the crags. Larger species, auguries, hippogriffs, and the like, simply cannot alight. With this formidable barrier behind them, the centaurs need only guard the open approaches. The Acromantula Hollow. Not far from Hagrid's hut stands a massive sycamore fig, the landmark you must find if you hope to glimpse the Acromantula nesting ground. From the fig, follow the barely visible path forward until the terrain dips steeply beneath your feet. Even at high noon, the canopy overhead is so thick that daylight struggles through. It's here, in that sunless hollow, that the giant spiders breed and multiply beyond count. The acromantulas remain hidden in the gloom by day, venturing out only after dark. So fearsome is their reputation that, save for Hagrid himself, no living creature, wizard or otherwise, will set foot inside, not even at the brightest hour. Here's a polished, idiomatic English version of the chapter. The Forbidden Forest is riddled with hidden realms, each more dangerous than the last. In one vast hollow, every tree has been felled. A misty, hemispherical web stretches from rim to rim, its surface alive with enormous black spiders, each as big as a cart horse, all 8 legs and 8 unblinking eyes, patrolling their silken domain. Further in, where a winding stream carves through the forest's heart, bramble thickets choke the banks, interlaced with ancient yew and oak. Here also grows the peculiar 2-eared grass, its twin fronds fluttering like tiny flags. This verdant glade is a haven for gentle herbivores, unicorns, thestrals, and other docile magical creatures, drawn by its rich foliage and peaceful atmosphere. But deeper still lies the forest's darkest secret, the lair of the werewolf clans. By daylight they hunt and store their prey, tumbling into restless sleep come nightfall. When the full moon drives them mad, they retreat behind hastily erected palisades, howling at the sky. These werewolves shun all intelligent life, isolating themselves so completely that only a lone, echoing howl betrays their existence. Now Ryan stands before a sheer rock face, tucked into this forbidding maze. Centaur sentries patrol its slopes, yet a single blind spot, barely a square meter in size, evades their watchful gaze. To most, the gap is hopelessly small, but Ryan's mastery of martial arts and his power of flight give him the confidence to slip through and press on into the unknown. Ryan found the perfect spot to train, perched high on a cliff's edge with an unobstructed view of the forbidden forest below. He drew in a steady breath and began his incantations under his breath, each syllable pulsing with power. Fractura, Cindere, Thunderbolt Blitz, Shadowless, Avada eats a big melon. Shimmering beams of magic streaked upwards, slicing through the air. Impatient for a grand finale, Ryan surged into the sky with a faint pop of teleportation magic, hovering above the cliff. With a final, resonant shout of Avada eats a big melon, a blinding green flash erupted, accompanied by a thunderous crack, like some unseen behemoth tearing through the atmosphere. Seconds later, an enormous spider tumbled from the cliff face and landed on its back, motionless. Its shell bore no visible wounds, but it was undoubtedly dead. Ryan let a satisfied smile tug at his lips. As dusk settled, he released the last of his crimson-tinted magic in a fiery exhale. Below him, the jagged rocks were littered with spider corpses, each one a testament to his relentless practice. Still humming with residual energy, he muttered, "That'll do for today." With a flicker of rouge-red magic, he vanished from the cliffside. Moments later, Ryan reappeared in the grand entrance hall of the castle. He straightened his collar, the glow in his eyes hinting at the day's triumphs, and called out smoothly, "Jack, crabs for dinner tonight." His tone brooked no argument. With that, he strode off toward the dining wing, every bit the confident mage returning from a day's conquest. Jack the house elf appeared almost as soon as Ryan called. "Yes, young master?" he asked, bowing politely. Ryan dabbed at his lips after a hearty mouthful of crab roe noodles and let out a contented sigh. That hit the spot. There's something exhilarating about casting spell after spell so effortlessly. He set down his chopsticks and stared at his fingers, marveling at the power he'd just unleashed. With that kind of magical output, spells flashing continuously, fueled by avatar magic, he could raise the entire Ministry of Magic in under an hour. The thought made Ryan's pulse quicken. "I'm truly invincible like this," he murmured. "Just imagine in 4 years, when I finally start at wizarding school, an immersion into magic on this level. Who would even stand a chance?" He grinned at the thought. Voldemort would never harm another innocent soul again. Despite his triumph, Ryan felt hungry for more. To think, I haven't even unlocked true 5th-level magic yet. I won't lower my expectations just because most wizards today are weak. What will a 7th or 8th-level curse, let alone the dreaded death curse, look like when I learn it? Jack cleared his throat softly, breaking Ryan's reverie. "Master, would you like some more crab vinegar?" His accent was charmingly imperfect, but his offer was sincere. "No, thank you," Ryan replied with calm confidence. Once Jack had departed, Ryan rose and padded back to his pink-walled bedroom. He changed into his pajamas, turned off the lights, and lay down on the soft bed. As he closed his eyes, the last thing he felt was the thrilling promise of the limitless magic yet to come. 3 months had slipped by almost unnoticed, and before Ryan realized it, it was 1988. On March 23rd, Easter began, and with it, a full 2 weeks of vacation. If only his school days in his former life had been this generous with holidays, he mused, reading Kate's cheerful letter announcing their upcoming break. A mischievous idea struck him, and he sat down to compose a teasing reply. He reminded her that year-end exams didn't arrive until June and urged her to start reviewing immediately, lest she risk a poor result after the holidays. Only Kate would fall for such bait. She was forever struggling to focus, especially in Transfiguration. She'd treated every professor with polite respect, even Snape, but she quaked at the thought of facing Professor McGonagall's stern gaze if her spells went awry. Ryan grinned, picturing the look of dismay on Kate's face when she woke up to that letter. He could already hear her protesting, though, like Ron, she'd soon argue that 2 whole months of cramming was excessive. After all, spanners in the works were the stock of every last-minute student, and Kate's boundless optimism would soon kick in, convincing herself that she'd be fine without an early start. Leaning back, Ryan chuckled and added a postscript. "Well, you know what? Send this to Penello instead. I bet it'll light a fire under her even faster." And with that, he sealed the envelope, imagining his plan unfolding perfectly. Only the top scholars really pay attention to these notices. I'm sure Penello will outline the new study plan in his next letter, and by then, Kate will already be swamped. There's just no escaping it, haha. With the letter finally corrected and the last forkful of his meal gone, Ryan straightened in his chair. He crossed himself over his chest and offered a silent prayer for Kate, who'd be chained to her textbooks all through the holiday. Poor girl, so much for a festive break. Finished, he swapped his casual clothes for a plain wizard's robe and stepped out into the drizzling twilight. "Spiders," he muttered with a grin as he approached the edge of the forbidden forest. "Your emperor has returned." Chapter 33, The End. What truly makes someone charming? Is it their looks, their way with words, or their intellect? Of course, looks isn't limited to a handsome face. To become a bona fide heartthrob in the eyes of girls, a guy needs more than good features. Clear, healthy skin, a fresh, non-greasy presence, and a well-proportioned physique all count just as much. Then there's conversation, real communication skills. The ability to get straight to the point, to speak with wit and warmth, and to leave people feeling uplifted is a rare gift. Finally, knowledge can capture the hearts of those who love to learn. A studious type might start off as just a friend or even meet with initial rejection, but once they get a chance to connect more deeply, it's hard to pull away. To Penelope, her boyfriend Ryan embodied charm in every way. From the moment she met him, she was captivated, first by his looks, then by the effortless confidence he carried into every room. Ryan's appearance was almost unnaturally perfect. His skin was pale and glowing, his body hair light and barely noticeable. His hair was always clean, never greasy, giving him a fresh, well-groomed look. His facial features fit together in an effortless symmetry, and his slender frame was proportioned as if by design. Of course, Penelope had no idea that his near-flawless good looks were the product of his secret mastery of transformative magic, on top of an already solid genetic foundation. But his appearance was only the beginning. Unlike many boys his age, who seemed desperate to show how grown-up they were, often by belittling others, Ryan treated everyone with quiet courtesy. More than that, he'd immersed himself in obscure unconventional magical texts, spells and theories you'd never find in standard school books. Penelope had started practicing these offbeat methods with him in private lessons, and found she learned far more smoothly than she ever had in regular classes. Still, life at Ravenclaw could feel cold and detached. Penelope sometimes dreamed of slipping away to Hufflepuff, where friendships were warm and inclusive, yet her own hunger for hidden knowledge always pulled her back. During the months they spent together, she often felt a little lost, but Ryan was always there to guide her, helping her with her studies and offering solid advice in her daily life. And, most importantly, it was through Ryan that Penelope met Kate, a bright, loyal friend who soon became indispensable to her. Penelope stared out the window of the common room, watching the clouds drift over the towers of Hogwarts. Ever since the episode with the crying boy Rocky, she'd been on edge, especially around Kate. At first, she'd wanted to put as much distance between them as possible. But when Ryan gently reminded her that Kate's odd behavior was really about Kate herself, not Penelope, she'd softened. Later that evening, Kate had led Penelope to the portrait of the red-haired informant, Percy Weasley, and urged her to listen carefully. Penelope had been surprised. She'd only half believed that Percy could know so much. Sometimes, in her more paranoid moments, Penelope even suspected that Ryan might be an adult wizard in disguise, someone who'd used Polyjuice Potion to pose as a child. But Kate had insisted they check the admission book in the headmaster's office. Once they did, the truth leapt off the page. Ryan Smith was indeed a Hogwarts student, just not in the same year as Rocky or Penelope. He was 4 years behind them, in the very class taught by Harry Potter, the boy who lived. That explained Ryan's skittishness whenever she asked too many questions. Penelope ran her fingers over the embossed title of the admission book, so that was Ryan's secret. She felt a flicker of betrayal. Should she humiliate him the way he'd started to embarrass her, expose him as a liar in front of their peers? Before she could decide, another thought struck her. Was she really in a position to judge? She'd pretended to be a second-year wizard from the Muggle world, too, just to have something to talk about with Ryan. And then there was Ryan's most astonishing secret of all. On the day Penelope first discovered it, she'd nearly fallen off her chair. Ryan could transform into a phoenix. She knew enough of phoenix lore to appreciate just how powerful and rare that magic was. A creature of flame and rebirth, bringing hope where there was none. She'd always found the idea magical. In that moment, Penelope realized that Ryan was more than a little boy with a secret. He was, quite literally, one of the most wondrous beings she'd ever met. As the firelight danced across the windows behind her, she made a quiet promise. She wouldn't expose him. Not yet. Instead, she'd learn more about his story and about the extraordinary magic that made him who he was. Penelope pressed the last stamp onto her reply just in time for Christmas Day. Lately, something felt off in her nightly chats with Ryan. Though he still transformed into his fiery phoenix form, his energy always seemed a shade dimmer, as if he'd just survived a fierce magical duel. That evening, curled up in her four-poster bed, Penelope tried not to think about it. Instead, she fretted about her own endless to-do list. What will Ryan say in his next letter? And oh no, Easter's almost here, and I've barely scratched the surface of the history of magic syllabus. I've been drowning in transfiguration. The very next morning, a cheerful owlish peck on the hearth awakened her. She snatched up Ryan's parchment and nearly choked on her breakfast when she read that their final exams were scheduled for June. "No way," she muttered, tossing aside her muffin. She sprinted from the common room and practically collided with Kate, who was tiptoeing toward the castle gardens. "Kate?" Startled, Kate spun around. "Penelope, what?" "Grab your books. Let's head to the Gryffindor study lounge and hunt down past exam papers. It's Easter break, yes, but we need a study plan. Today." Kate groaned, flopping her shoulder bag to the floor. "But I was planning to relax, maybe practice a few Quidditch drills." "Resistance is futile," Penelope declared, sweeping Kate up in her arms. Kate sagged limply, conceding defeat. Together they marched back into the castle, determination blazing brighter than any phoenix flame, because nothing, not even Easter holidays, would stand between them and a well-earned triumph in June. "There's one more thing," Penelope said, pausing mid-letter and tapping her quill against the parchment. "I'm going to write to Ryan and pick his brain. But what if they insist I sit the exam myself?" That evening in the Ravenclaw common room, she cornered Ryan, whose copper hair glowed like embers in the lamplight, and peppered him with questions. Finally, she leaned in and lowered her voice. "Keep an eye on the post," she warned. "My next letter will spell out everything." Meanwhile, in an empty practice room, Ryan dispelled his phoenix transformation and sank onto a bench, sighing deeply. He rubbed his temples and muttered, "Did I just shoot myself in the foot? Penelope's becoming less subtle by the day. I'm fairly certain she's gunning for me." At long last, 3 grueling months of revision came to an end, and June arrived. Though they were in different corners of Hogwarts, both Ryan and Kate let out a shared breath of relief. No longer bound by punishing study schedules, they felt liberated. For Kate especially, the looming exams had transformed from a nightmare into a welcome escape from Penelope's relentless schemes. With results due in the second week of June and a final celebratory dinner to follow, the third week would usher in the start of summer vacation. And before they knew it, they'd return in September as second-year students, wondering, perhaps, just how much they'd grown over the summer. Kate settled at her desk, parchment and quill at the ready, and began to write. In careful, looping script, she invited Ryan to join her in London over the summer, part sightseeing tour, part escape from the lingering awkwardness they both felt around Penelope. After all, both she and Ryan had caught what Kate privately dubbed Penelope syndrome, an emotional hangover they weren't eager to confront face-to-face. Letters, however, offered the perfect balance of closeness and distance. When she finished, she reread her invitation, smiled, and sealed the envelope with a satisfying click of wax. "Truly, I'm the best friend ever," she murmured, handing the letter to Jack the Owl. Moments later, Ryan was sorting through letters in his study when Jack alighted on a nearby perch and dropped Kate's missive into his lap. He opened it at once and read through her proposal. A grin spread across his face. Kate's letter. Perfect timing. Penelope's entire family is away on their annual trip, so we won't bump into her all summer. He leaned back in his chair and let out a relieved sigh. "I'm feeling pretty invincible these days. But invincible enough to tempt fate? Not quite. I might as well look into that travel agency that arranges Wizarding World tours." Pulling fresh parchment toward him, Ryan dipped his quill and began to write his reply. Once he'd finished, he entrusted the letter back to Jack with clear instructions for delivery. With business handled, he let his mind wander. "A horror-themed tour," he said to himself, picturing haunted castles and whispering corridors. "I've wanted to do one forever, but Mum and Dad always vetoed it. Now that they'll be off on business this summer, I finally have my chance." And so, with pens laid down and plans quietly unfurling, Kate and Ryan each looked forward to a summer of adventure, amid London's bustling streets and the shadowy wonders of the Wizarding World. "Horror tour, here I come," Kate whispered to herself as she carefully folded the reply letter into her pocket. She'd been counting down the days ever since the invitation arrived, and now it was finally time to set off. The very next morning, Ryan showed up at 59 Diagon Alley, wand at the ready, and appointment confirmation in hand. The narrow storefront before him bore a flickering sign that read "Horror Tour" in blood-red letters. Inside, stacked travel brochures displayed an array of spine-tingling packages, a week's stay in a vampire castle perched on Transylvania's misty peaks, guided hikes along the infamous Zombie Trail, and a guided cruise through the Bermuda Triangle's most mysterious waters. Beneath the brochures, a flashing disclaimer boasted in bold, "Horror Tour accepts no liability for injuries or death incurred on any excursion." The dramatic warning was all part of the agency's flair. Ryan had already checked their records and found no trace of fatalities. It was just theatrical marketing designed to thrill novices and rope in the bravest among them. He pushed through the creaky door, curiosity and excitement warring in his chest. Whatever lay ahead, he knew Kate was in for the adventure of a lifetime. Chapter 34. Ignotus Peverell. From the street, the travel agency appeared entirely ordinary. Its facade hinted at the same architect behind Ollivander's wand shop, but unlike that crumbling storefront down the lane, this one looked well cared for. Gleaming above the door, gilded letters proclaimed the name, Horror Tour. Pushing inside, Ryan found the room modestly furnished. To his right, a marble-fronted counter stretched out, and perched behind it on a towering stool was the receptionist. On the wall behind him hung framed photographs of the agency's featured destinations. A lightning-split castle rising from black clouds, a moonlit graveyard where skeletal hands clawed from the earth, and the churning waves of the Bermuda Triangle itself. The moment Ryan stepped in, the clerk rose and ambled around the counter. He reappeared through a side door, carrying a parchment form and a quill. "Sir, welcome to Horror Tour," he chirped, setting the papers before Ryan. "We haven't had a walk-in customer in ages. Everyone usually books by owl. Here you are, the itinerary selection form. Feel free to take your time. If you need any help filling it out, just let me know." Ryan's expression remained unmoved as he accepted the parchment. He tapped the quill against the desk, then looked the receptionist squarely in the eye. "Have you considered," he said in a flat tone, "that I might just be here to look around?" The receptionist's grin faltered for a fraction of a second. Then he recovered, leaning forward and lowering his voice with conspiratorial gusto. "By all means, sir, browse at your leisure. But I assure you, once you see what we have in store, you'll be eager to book your own private nightmare." With that, he stepped back, giving Ryan the space to examine the chilling possibilities before him. "Who might you be?" The receptionist's ears twitched, and her cheeks warmed to a deep shade of crimson. Ryan held up his hands, offering a polite smile. "Sorry, I'd like to book a trip." She relaxed slightly as he walked over to a small, round table carved from jujube wood. Ryan picked up what looked at first glance like a restaurant menu, but the pages turned out to be an astonishingly detailed travel brochure. He flipped through section after section. Departure points, travel dates, route options, and even modes of transport, flu network hearths, wizarding express buses, portkey flights, and for those wanting a touch of nostalgia, horse-drawn carriages. Further in, there were prompts for party size, dining preferences, and cuisine choices, ranging from traditional British fare to exotic specialties. Ryan paused at Transylvanian cuisine, Romanian. A 9-day journey sounded tempting, if a bit long. He let out a soft sigh, then began filling in the form. "All right," he said once he'd written down his choices. "July 1st through the 11th, departing from Godric's Hollow. 2 travelers, please." The receptionist nodded and tapped her quill on the parchment. 2 people, 25 galleons each for the trip, and an extra 25 apiece covers the restaurant reservations. That brings us to 100 gold galleons total. We require a 60-galleon deposit now, with the remaining 40 due when you return. Ryan set a heavy purse of coins on the table. "Here you go," he said. "I'll settle the rest when we're back." The receptionist smiled, her ears no longer burning, then counted out the deposit and tucked the form into a waiting folder. Their journey, it seemed, was officially booked. Ryan slipped a pouch of 60 gold galleons across the counter. "That'll cover everything," he said, his voice low but steady. "I'll be there at 6 o'clock on July 1st. The receptionist, an elderly witch with a calm, practiced air, counted the coins with a nod. From beneath the stone platform, she produced 2 small flags, emblazoned with a stylized skull. "Here," she said, handing them to Ryan. "You won't be alone at the rendezvous point in Godric's Hollow. Muggles tend to gather there at sunset. We'll pose as an ordinary travel agency. When you see this flag, that's our signal. We'll come to collect you." Ryan slipped the flags into his coat pocket. Perfect. He paused, recalling the real reason he'd chosen Godric's Hollow as the departure point. "I've heard the birthplace of the child who lived and the old Potter house are both nearby." "Indeed," the receptionist agreed. "They're only visible to those of us with magic in our blood. You might want to arrive early and take it all in." He nodded. "Kate and I will probably do that. Then, once we're ready, we can hire a private car instead of joining the larger tour bus. It'll just be the two of us, and a bit pricier, of course, but I'd rather not mix with other tourists right away." She gave him a knowing smile. "Understood. We'll arrange everything once we've picked you up. Enjoy your solo reconnaissance, and safe travels." Stepping back onto the cobblestone street, Ryan breathed in the evening air. Godric's Hollow, named for the storied founder of Gryffindor, was more than just the starting line for their journey. It was history incarnate, the final resting place of the Peverell line, the very spot where legend and memory collided. Tonight, he and Kate would stand where heroes had walked, unseen by Muggle eyes, ready to follow in their footsteps. If Ryan's guess was correct, this land marked the ancestral grounds of the Smith family. After the International Statute of Secrecy came into force in 1689, Godric's Hollow blossomed into one of the wizarding world's most celebrated villages. Over the centuries, countless magical lineages had made their homes here. The Dumbledore family once lived in these very cottages, and the eminent historian Bathilda Bagshot was their next-door neighbor. When Albus Dumbledore's father, Percival, was imprisoned, the family relocated to Godric's Hollow, and it was Bathilda Bagshot who welcomed them to the village. The churchyard brimmed with weathered gravestones bearing the names of ancient wizarding clans, Peverell among them, and the tiny chapel on the hill had inspired ghost stories for centuries. Back at the castle, Ryan was quick to pen another letter to Kate. He sealed it in parchment, tucked a small silver flag inside for good measure, and dispatched it via owl, arranging to meet her in Godric's Hollow at 11:30 the next morning. The following day dawned crisp and pale. True to habit, Ryan slipped out for his morning run in the Forbidden Forest. Only when the sun was high in the sky did he make his way back toward the castle, arriving in the corridors near the washrooms just before 11 o'clock. Ryan splashed cold water on his face, then slipped into the charcoal-gray wizard's robe Jack had prepared. Hidden in its deep, enchanted pockets, each bewitched with a faultless, traceless extension charm, were everyday necessities and a pouch of Muggle money. Wand at his side, he took a steadying breath and apparated. He materialized in the pale dawn at the heart of Godric's Hollow, in a small square beside what looked like a war memorial. To any Muggle, it would be just another monument, and indeed it did not appear on any public map. Ryan could stand there, vanish and reappear, and no one would bat an eye. He approached the obelisk, reading the names etched into its surface. As he drew near, the stone seemed to ripple, and then reshaped itself. The solemn memorial transformed into a sculpted family portrait. A tousle-haired man with round glasses, a gentle-faced woman cradling a baby boy. It was unmistakably James and Lily Potter holding their infant son. A thrill ran through Ryan. This was the Potter family's hidden tribute, a secret monument veiled from Muggle eyes. He turned away from the statue and followed the narrow path leading to the old parish church, the same route Harry and Hermione had taken in the stories he loved. At the back of the churchyard, neat rows of tombstones stretched into the mist. Wizarding names were inscribed on each, none familiar to the Ministry's Muggle records. The headstone closest to the church door simply read, Abbott. Ryan's pulse quickened. Could this be the grave of one of Hannah Abbott's ancestors? Standing among those silent stones, Ryan felt the weight of the past and the promise of uncovering its secrets. Ryan crouched before the weathered slab of granite, brushing away a veil of ice and moss to reveal the faded inscription. Kendra Dumbledore. That was the name etched into the ancient stone, followed by the dates of her birth and death. And just beneath, in smaller letters, the name of her daughter, Ariana. Below the names lay a simple motto, where the treasure is, there the heart will follow. In the chill air, the gravesite felt eerily deserted. In the wizarding world, people rarely came to cemeteries to mourn. Instead, they remembered their dead through enchanted portraits and memories. No fresh flowers or candles marked these graves. Kendra and Ariana lay in solitude, their resting place undisturbed. Ryan thought of Aberforth Dumbledore, who spent his days in the company of Ariana's portrait rather than returning to this melancholy spot. Albus Dumbledore, too, must rarely or never visit. Had the great wizard ever stood here, reading the same words? Ryan had hoped to find another living soul in these shadows, perhaps even Albus himself, but the only company was the distant howl of wind through bare branches. He rose, shifting his gaze along the row of tombstones. One in particular stood out, a fragment of broken granite, its surface mottled with lichen, bearing only a nearly illegible name. Ryan knelt again, squinting to study the carving. There, faint beneath the moss, was a small triangular symbol, and next to it, in the ghost of old lettering, the name Ignotus. Ryan's heart raced, and his moonlit eyes seemed to sparkle with sudden fire. A chill ran down his spine. This discovery, this hidden marker, felt like the key to something far greater than a family's private grief. As the wind whispered through the lonely graveyard, Ryan knew that the real journey was only just beginning. Ryan closed his eyes and called upon his phoenix vision. Through its amber haze, the weathered tombstone before him blurred, and the grave beneath was revealed. The coffin lay empty. No bones, no dust, only a handful of silver trinkets scattered across the soil. He knelt, palms hovering over the earth, and willed the nearest object into his hand. In a ripple of arcane light, a delicate silver necklace materialized between his fingers. It gleamed as though still newly forged. Carefully, he unclasped its little locket and pried it open. Inside was a small, crisp photograph of a young wizard, jet-black hair framing somber dark eyes. A frown tugged at Ryan's lips. In their youth, both Dumbledore and de Lindwall had surveyed this very sight. Yet neither had unearthed this locket. Had they simply overlooked it, or could only the Phoenix vision reveal what lay hidden? He ran a fingertip across the image, where a faint pulse of magic throbbed through the metal. "This," he whispered, "is the essence of the god of death." The words tasted strange on his tongue. Is this deity itself, or merely its heir? He sighed, sliding the necklace into his pocket. Whatever power it held, he knew better than to underestimate it. A sudden ripple of distant magic prickled at his senses. With barely a thought, Ryan vanished in a flash of scarlet light. Moments later, he reappeared beside the roaring night bus. Its lanterns cast long shadows across the cobblestones. Kate was already there, pacing, her coat flapping in the wind. She looked up and offered him a tight smile. "Got it?" she asked. Ryan met her gaze, finger brushing the hidden locket beneath his jacket. "I did," he said softly. "And it's more powerful than we imagined." Chapter 35, The Night Bus. In an instant, a colossal 3-deck purple bus tore through the night, as if summoned from thin air. It thundered down the street toward the church, the pavement trembling beneath its wheels. Any obstacle in its path, parked cars, stray trash bins, seemed to leap aside of its own accord. Emblazoned across its windshield in gleaming gold letters were the words "Night Bus." Coated in enchanted purple paint, it was warded against Muggle detection. To ordinary eyes, the vehicle and its surroundings were utterly invisible and intangible. But there it was, roaring to a halt in front of the church doors. Through the front window, Ryan made out the driver, an elderly wizard with round spectacles and a feathery, owl-like face. This had to be Ernie Prang, the infamous conductor of the night bus, whose name Prang wryly echoes the Old English slang for crash a car. Ryan fought a smile at the aptness of it. Obsessed as he was with alchemy, Ryan examined the bus with professional curiosity. The entire vehicle was a masterpiece of magical engineering. It even bore a mechanism reminiscent of the Book of Access. At any roadside, a wizard in dire need of transport need only raise a wand-bearing hand. The night bus would sense the gesture, appear in a flash, and offer refuge to the stranded traveler. As the doors hissed open, Ryan stepped forward, heart pounding. He'd come to the right place. His journey was about to take a very unexpected turn. When the night bus finally screeched to a halt at the curb, I could scarcely believe my eyes. A battered purple triple-decker like that. One day, after I graduate, I'll be the one at the wheel, journeying the world. A young conductor in a violet uniform bounded down the steps and boomed at the assembled crowd. "Welcome aboard the night bus. Emergency transport for witches and wizards in distress. Just point your wand, hop on board, and we'll take you anywhere you need to go. I'm Stan Sandpark, your conductor today." Stan Sandpark? Isn't he that braggart who once claimed ties to the Death Eaters and wound up under arrest? Always desperate to make a name for himself. I watched him scan the line of would-be passengers until his gaze landed on me. "Fancy a ride, sir?" he asked, hopping from one foot to the other. I said nothing, merely nodded toward the small witch trembling behind him. For a moment, Stan looked puzzled, then he scratched his head and gave me an awkward, sheepish grin. He couldn't have been more than 14 or 15, clearly trained by some well-connected family wizard, just as the rumors had always suggested. With that, he swung open the bus's doors, ready to whisk us off on our next adventure. Chapter text. Harry first saw him on the eve of his 3rd year at Hogwarts. Back then, the man looked no older than 19, and the flamboyant self-introduction he delivered that night was so vivid it's never left Harry's mind. But today, all attention has shifted from Stan to Kate. As the night bus lurches away down the street, Stan slips back into the waiting car and vanishes into the night. Kate, undeterred, is in high spirits. She's wearing a lion head hat, the faux fur mane frames her face, and the sculpted jaws gape open as if the little beast is about to roar. Paired with her brown, fur-trimmed wizard's robes, she looks like a pint-sized lion prancing on 2 feet. "Roar! I look so cool today," Kate declares, bounding toward Ryan. Ryan says nothing. He simply reaches out, takes the dragonhide satchel from her hand, and tucks it into his pocket, as if the exchange is perfectly ordinary. Kate's cheeks puff out in mock indignation. She gives the lion's mane a playful tug. "Ryan, don't tell me you don't think I look awesome." Ryan blinks and rubs his eyes. "Kate, remember we're going on a trip," he reminds her gently. She blinks back, perplexed. "Yes. What's wrong with my outfit?" He sighs. "You look fantastic, but a bit too wizarding for this journey. We'll be spending most of our time in Muggle society. We need to blend in." Kate narrows her eyes and crosses her arms. "Fine, but why the lion's head? Why not something else?" Ryan shrugs, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. "Because you love lions. It's as simple as that." Kate's pout melts into a grin. She adjusts the lion's head and gives it one last triumphant tug. "Then it's perfect, just like me." "Do all Ravenclaws have to like eagles?" Ryan asked, nodding toward the intricate eagle crest embroidered on Kate's robes. Kate beamed. "Not at all, but I figured it was fitting." She gave a playful shrug. "Besides, I'm our resident Muggle expert. I just got back from an amusement park, and I couldn't resist dressing the part." She paused, her eyes sparkling. "But that's not the main reason I insisted we meet here. I want you to taste the special delicacies of Godric's Hollow, the very ones my family's been coming for generations." With a dramatic roll of her eyes, she steered him down the cobbled street. Kate's wizarding robes, bright blue with bronze trim, looked more like a Halloween costume than everyday wear, but she wore them with effortless confidence. "Food, huh? Finally!" Ryan groaned, though the faint edge of a grin betrayed his excitement. "British food. You're testing me, aren't you?" Kate just laughed. In minutes, they arrived at a small, unassuming shop nestled between a bookshop and a florist. From the outside, it looked exactly like the kind of cafe you'd find on any Muggle high street. A rustic wooden sign, potted flowers on the sill, and a handwritten chalkboard menu. Inside, the mix of patrons was delightfully eclectic. Wizards in brightly colored robes clustered at tables, chatting over steaming cups of tea. Scattered among them were Muggles, utterly unaware they'd stumbled into a genuine wizarding favorite. Even more amusing were the weekend tourists in homemade wizard outfits, convinced this was an interactive role-playing cafe. Kate led Ryan to a window seat. "See, they think this is all for show. They have no idea." Ryan sank into the chair, glanced around, and finally let himself relax. "I can't wait to try whatever got your family hooked." Kate settled opposite him, already reaching for the menu. "Wait till you taste their mead-steamed oysters and the pumpkin custard tart. You're in for a treat." The hotel's proprietor was a rotund, pot-bellied wizard with a merry twinkle in his eye, exactly the sort of easygoing fellow you'd expect to run a cozy inn. As soon as he spotted Kate, he greeted her warmly, clapping her on the shoulder like an old friend. Once we'd been shown to a private dining room, Kate beamed and unveiled today's feast. First came the surf and turf, succulent grilled shrimp alongside a perfectly seared steak. Then the centerpiece, Kate's signature take on a centuries-old local specialty, lamb tripe filled with meatloaf and baked in hearty bread. Traditionally, this dish arrived in Scotland with the Vikings, and to purists it's something of a dark, offal-packed curiosity. But our beer-bellied wizard had reinvented it, swapping lamb for tender venison. The filling was a rich blend of onions, bacon, and fresh venison offal, just a hint of deer lungs, kidneys, and blood clots for authenticity, slow-cooked for 2 to 3 hours in a broth spiced with generous pinches of West Indian allspice. Roasted Scottish oats bound everything together, giving the loaf a satisfying, nutty crunch. Finally, the entire mixture was stuffed into slender venison casings and roasted until the crust of bread turned golden. On the plate, the aroma was a complex harmony of warm spices and roasting meat. The usual gamey tang of offal was almost imperceptible. I admit, I found it surprisingly delicious, though Ryan sat across from me, nose slightly wrinkled, clearly unconvinced by its exotic charm. Still, Kate's proud smile said it all. This dish, perfected in our little inn by the jovial wizard and her own skill, was truly one of a kind. Chapter 7. A Taste of Britain. Kate dipped her spoon into the bubbling pot and paused, surprised by the fragrance. The stew's appearance hadn't been much to look at. Pale scallops mingling with dark slices of blood pudding, streaks of crispy bacon, and a sprinkle of green chives, but its aroma and taste more than made up for the rest. To her delight, she found the combination unexpectedly delicious, truly worthy of its British reputation. This surf and turf stew was a local specialty, each ingredient prepared separately, then tossed together in a single pot to simmer until the flavors melded. It reminded her of a hearty northeastern-style seafood stew, hearty, warming, and perfect for a cool afternoon. By the time they'd polished off what must have been half the tavern's supply, a friendly, beer-bellied innkeeper was guiding them toward the door, already offering a fresh pint should they return. Outside, the crisp air was a pleasant surprise after the kitchen's heat. Kate turned to Ryan with a grin. "That was excellent venison, wasn't it?" Ryan ruffled her hair affectionately, feeling the residual warmth of the kitchen in her curls. "Absolutely," he said. "You've got to try some amazing Chinese dishes next time. Those flavors will knock your socks off." Kate laughed. "Promise?" "Promise," he smiled. Then he grew thoughtful. "So what's on the agenda for the rest of today?" "Godric's Hollow is lovely," Kate said. "There are centuries-old wizard tombs everywhere. And of course, it's where Harry Potter was born." "Harry Potter?" Ryan's eyes lit up. "In that case, let's go see the old Potter family home this afternoon. I hear they've opened it to visitors." With that decision made, they set off down the winding lane, eager for their next adventure, and whatever surprises Godric's Hollow might hold. Chapter 36. Potter's Old House. The meal had barely settled when Ryan remembered something he knew would thrill Kate. She was a devoted Dumbledore enthusiast, so devoted, in fact, that she'd nearly been sorted into Gryffindor on his account. "Kate," Ryan said, leaning forward, "how much do you know about the Dumbledores?" Kate's eyes lit up. "The Dumbledores? Aren't they all from that fertile plain in England? What does this have to do with—" "I'll fill you in," Ryan interrupted, grinning. "Albus was born on those plains, yes, but after his father was imprisoned in Azkaban, the family moved here. I've actually visited their graves. His mother and sister lie in the churchyard." Intrigued, Kate set down her napkin, and within minutes the two of them were making their way back into the village. They passed Amber's tombstone, one of Ryan's old friends, then slipped through the low wooden door into the little churchyard. Kate lingered over the weathered marble marker that read Kendra Dumbledore, tracing the carved letters with her fingertip. Ryan joined her at the adjacent stone for Ariana, Albus's younger sister, and together they stood in respectful silence beneath the overhanging yews. But Potter's old house lay even farther out, beyond the last cottage, past fields where the wind ruffled golden wheat. Before Kate could complain about the distance, Ryan scooped her up in his arms. She laughed in surprise as her fold-out lion's mane costume brushed against his neck, its soft fibers tickling him until he reached out to steady her. "Easy there," Ryan said with a chuckle, though he didn't put her down. They made slow but steady progress down the country lane, the churchyard fading behind them and Potter's abandoned home looming ahead, a forgotten relic waiting to tell its own story. I returned once more to the Harry Potter statue and set off down the lane opposite the village church, a narrow road that leads out into the countryside. After a few minutes' walk, the tidy rows of cottages fell away, and ahead of us rose a crumbling ruin framed by tangled hedges and waist-high weeds. Most of the old house still stood, its walls cloaked in twisted ivy and fresh snow, but a section of the upper story had been blown away, leaving a jagged gap in the roofline. "Is this really where the Potters lived?" Kate asked, her voice low with curiosity. Ryan gave a short nod but said nothing more. I could sense his unease, wondering if it had been a mistake to bring her here. This place was more than just a tourist spot. It was a memorial to Voldemort's defeat and the hard-won peace that followed. Kate reached out and rested her hand on the weather-beaten doorframe. As if in response, a wooden plaque seemed to sprout from the earth before us, pushing aside nettles and dead weeds like a strange, accelerating bloom. Its gilded lettering gleamed in the pale light. October 31st, 1981. Lily and James Potter died here. Their son Harry was the only wizard to survive the killing curse. The house, hidden from Muggle sight, has been left in its ruined state, as both a memorial to the Potters and a stark reminder of the violence that tore their family apart. Along the weathered walls, tidy engravings sit side by side with countless inscriptions from visiting witches and wizards, each paying homage to the spot where the boy who lived cheated death. Some have simply signed their names in everlasting ink. Others have carved initials onto wooden plaques. Many have left heartfelt messages. The most recent scrawls, now 16 years old and still softly glowing with magic, echo the same sentiments over and over. Good luck, Harry, wherever you are. Harry, we're all rooting for you. Long live Harry Potter. Kate gently tugged Ryan forward and urged him to add his own well wishes. As he wrote, the butterflies in his stomach fluttered away, replaced by a quiet melancholy he couldn't shake. Suddenly, a small, icy hand slid around the back of his collar, tapping him mischievously. Kate noticed his change in mood and offered him a reassuring smile. Today has been incredible, she said softly, as if sharing a secret. For the first time, I really understand how much sacrifice goes into keeping this peace. It makes everything feel meaningful. She paused, her eyes lighting up with a playful seriousness. Because you see, I'm not just a girl from Florida. I'm a time traveler, the world's destined savior. With that, Kate stepped back, her confidence radiating in the crisp air, leaving Ryan to contemplate the weight of her words amid the 1,000 glowing tributes to the boy who lived. I couldn't believe I was taking comfort from a little girl. Then again, that might have been exactly her magic's design. I forced a smile and glanced at the clock. 6 o'clock sharp. At that moment, a sleek black carriage emerged from the swirling mist, its bells tinkling like distant laughter. A short, hook-nosed wizard dressed in charcoal robes stepped down from the carriage's side. With a courteous bow, he called out, "Mr. Smith, Ms. Lewingster, welcome aboard. Our first destination is the vampire castle in Romania." He waved us in. "Please, after you." Kate slid off my back and landed lightly on the gravel. I paused on the top step. "Wait a minute," I muttered under my breath. "They call this a Muggle tour group? Someone's really warped their definition of Muggle." Kate gave me a puzzled look, but trotted past the wizard into the carriage. I followed her inside and was immediately struck by the opulent, Gothic interior. The floor was laid in deep crimson carpet, and bat-shaped lanterns hovered overhead, their leathery wings flapping soundlessly as they drifted around the ceiling. It wasn't just a carriage, it was a mobile vampire suite. 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, even a small entertainment room. All we needed was a throne for the Count himself. The hook-nosed wizard straightened in the doorway. "Mr. Smith, Miss Lewingster, we've prepared dinner for you on board this evening. You'll dine here as we travel. Sleep comes later, once we reach Romania." I exchanged a look with Kate. I could already tell this was going to be one hell of a trip. The hook-nosed wizard led us down a short corridor and pushed open a heavy door. Inside, the recreation room was warm and inviting. Tea was laid out on a sideboard, and platters of pastries and sandwiches begged to be sampled. Directly opposite the door stood a sleek, black, coffin-shaped enclosure. Kate cleared her throat and announced, "That's actually the driver's cabin." The rest of the room was taken up by shelves and low tables, each strewn with familiar wizarding games, gobstones, wizard's chess, and a stack of exploding snap cards. Kate gave Ryan a nudge toward a plush sofa. "Come on, want to play gobstones?" Ryan hesitated, but sat down anyway. Kate scooped up a handful of smooth-colored stones. "It's like Muggle marbles," she explained, "except when you lose a point, your stones squirt this foul-smelling slime all over you. Pretty delightful, right?" Ryan's eyes widened. "They spray you in the face?" "Absolutely," Kate replied with a grin. "And if you'd rather gamble with cards, those exploding snap decks are right over there. Plenty of thrills before we reach Romania." He sighed and rubbed his temples. "Are these really the only games wizards know?" Kate laughed. "Not at all. Just the classics. But if you're bored, we can always go upstairs and watch the countryside roll by." With that, she shuffled her gobstones. Ryan eyed the set warily, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake agreeing to come aboard. "Look how beautiful it is," Ryan exclaimed, sliding open the one-way window beside the sofa. Outside, the landscape blurred past so swiftly it left him momentarily speechless. Kate puffed out her cheeks, trying to peer through the glass. "What am I supposed to be seeing? I can't make out a thing." A soft voice drifted from the ornate coffin in the corner, the hook-nosed wizard speaking kindly. "When we reach the castle tomorrow morning, the bat lanterns will play a beautiful melody to let you and your friends know it's time to prank. Disembark. I apologize for not mentioning earlier that our journey won't end until dawn." Ryan nodded. He lifted the silver teapot from the low table and poured a steaming cup for Kate, then filled one for himself. Next, he unwrapped a pack of chocolate frogs, slid off the silver foil, and fished out the collectible card inside. The glossy portrait showed a man with half-moon spectacles, a hooked nose, and a flowing white beard. "It's Dumbledore!" Kate cried, bits of licorice wand still dangling from her lips. "Ryan, you've got to trade that one. I only have 3 Dumbledore cards already." He turned the card over. Beneath the portrait, elegant script proclaimed, "Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts, regarded as the greatest wizard of our time." Albus Dumbledore's reputation rests on 3 famous accomplishments: vanquishing the dark wizard Gellert Grindelwald in 1945, cataloging the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and revolutionizing alchemy alongside his longtime collaborator, Nicholas Flamel. He's also known for his more eccentric pursuits, chamber music, and surprisingly, 10-pin bowling. Kate flipped the card over and frowned. "There's just one glaring omission," she said, tapping the surface with her fingernail. "You know he won the Barnabas Finkley Award for Outstanding Spellcasting in his 7th year at Hogwarts, yet it's not even mentioned here. I even wrote him a letter about it. Never got so much as a postcard in return." Ryan watched her with wide eyes. He had seen Kate animated before, but never this passionate about a trading card. It was the first time he'd ever known her to care so deeply about a piece of Wizarding World memorabilia, and frankly, he found it kind of endearing. Chapter 37. The Magic of Gestures. Kate sat on the plush carriage bench, gently rocking the small lion's head emblem in her hands. Ryan leaned forward, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Gesture-based casting? You mean this award is for that?" A proud smile curved Kate's lips. "Exactly. It's named after Barnabas Finkley, the great master of gesture magic. They give it to wizards who demonstrate outstanding spellcasting technique." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Gestures are simply an alternative way to channel magic, a built-in shortcut that lowers the difficulty of casting spells. From a purely magical standpoint, this honor isn't all that significant. No wonder the chocolate frog manufacturers left it off their cards." He slipped the thought into Kate's mind by way of mental communication. Better to keep such opinions from the driver. Kate's eyes widened, and she sent her reply just as silently. "Mr. Ryan, I'm sure you've heard of the great names who swear that gestures actually amplify a spell's power." She looked up at him, her wide, curious gaze almost pleading for validation. Ryan couldn't help but smile. She reminded him of the schoolgirl from that Japanese movie he'd once watched, timidly calling him sensei. He found her enthusiasm utterly endearing. Professor Lenson, who had been quietly observing, cleared his throat. With a firm but encouraging tone, he said, "Since you're so certain gestures are mere tricks, Ryan, why don't you demonstrate a more effective casting method for Kate?" Kate's excitement was palpable as she prepared to learn directly from Ryan, and the debate over gesture magic was only just beginning. Kate frowned at the professor's reminder of precision and muttered under her breath, "Ugh, too fussy." Now, the professor chided gently. "Thank you for your input, Miss Parkinson. That'll be 5 points from Ravenclaw." Across the workbench, Ryan glanced at Kate with a half-smile. "Tell me, Kate, have you ever thought about how speech and gestures are connected?" Kate blinked. I'm not sure what you mean. They're two different things, right?" "Not at all," Ryan said. "In the Muggle world, scholars have long studied this. Think back to the last time you watched someone speak about something they love. Didn't they almost dance with excitement?" Kate considered that. To make themselves more convincing? To build their own confidence? "Exactly," Ryan said. "A spell's strength ultimately comes from the caster's belief. You can't pour from an empty cup. That's why we teach silent casting only to 6th-year students at Hogwarts. If your conviction is strong enough, you can perform a charm without uttering a word." He paused, watching Kate's eyes light up with understanding. Gestures work the same way. They reinforce your self-confidence and channel your magic more effectively. The more natural your motion, the surer you feel, and the more powerful the spell. Kate leaned forward eagerly. "That makes so much sense. But what about Wakatu? You mentioned it yesterday." Ryan's grin widened. Wakatu, the most unconventional wizarding school I've ever heard of. They don't use owls or flu powder to recruit students. Instead, they rely on dreams." Kate's jaw dropped. "Dreams? How does that even work?" "When a child shows magical potential, they become dreamers. Each night, under the Wand of Whispers, they leave behind a token, a slip of parchment etched with a single word. That word holds the key to their future studies at Wakatu." Kate gave an awed whistle. "Incredible. Just imagine, fall asleep, and you wake up with your acceptance letter already waiting for you." Ryan chuckled and ruffled his hair. "And that, my friend, is why little Shito is so excited to get his token tonight. He's been practicing his gestures all afternoon, hoping to leave behind a perfect charm in his dreams." Kate laughed, shaking her head. "I can't wait to hear how it goes. But first, let's perfect our wrist flicks for tomorrow's lesson. No more point deductions, agreed?" "Agreed." Ryan gave her a mock salute, and they bent over their wands, ready to weave their next spell, words, gestures, and all. Kate could hardly contain her excitement. "No other school recruits students like this," she blurted out, forgetting to rein in her telepathic restraint. Words tumbled from her lips in a flood. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Do you know anything about them?" "I've known about them since I was 7, Kate replied, matter-of-factly. Ryan's surprise must have shown on his face. He couldn't help but wonder why she emphasized that age. Sensing his curiosity, Kate sat up straighter. Wakatu is an ancient institution, over 1,000 years old, and it's the largest wizarding school in the world. They accept students from every corner of this vast African continent. What's more, Wakatu doesn't conceal its location like the others do. It sits atop the so-called Mountain of the Moon, a breathtaking stone fortress clinging to a mist-shrouded mountainside. When the fog rolls in, the whole place looks like it's floating. Ryan was already picturing the scene. So few Hogwarts students had ever heard of an African school of magic. Kate went on, her voice brimming with admiration. Their students are incredible. Many of their spells require nothing more than a single flick of the wrist or a deft gesture. One wave and you've got an audience gasping in awe. She paused, letting the image sink in. That's why I'm so eager to go. She added, Wakatu's reputation for mastering effortless, elegant magic, I've dreamed of studying there for as long as I can remember. They're masters of self-transformation too, Kate said, her eyes alight with excitement. Unlike British animagi, who can only become specific creatures they've studied and registered, the wizards of Wakatu can shift into any common African animal. A 14-year-old there might snap his fingers and become a cheetah or an elephant without breaking a sweat. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Wait, weren't you just talking about gestures? Why do Wakatu's wizards rely solely on hand movements? Kate tilted her head. Because in their system, the hands are the wand. A simple sign is enough to channel the magic. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. That doesn't mean modern British magic is inferior or useless. You know the formula. A triangle is the most stable geometric shape. In Britain, we always combine 3 elements in every spell: gesture, incantation, and emotional focus. Together, they guarantee both power and precision, so there's virtually no chance of backfiring. Kate tapped her chin. That 3-part approach must outclass Wakatu's single gesture technique. No wonder their warriors lean on self-transformation instead of raw spell work. Exactly, said Ryan. Harnessing all 3 channels, body, voice, and mind, creates a force far stronger and more reliable than gesture alone. It's why our duels look so controlled compared to theirs. He paused, a faraway look in his eyes. And you remember that mysterious traveler we met last month? He was well aware of these differences, so much so that he carried both a wand and a feathered mask from Wakatu with him. The 2 friends fell silent as the firelight danced across their faces, each lost in imagineering the tremendous feats waiting to be uncovered between these 2 very different magical traditions. Ryan shook his head with a wry smile. If hand gesture magic really were that powerful, why would modern spellcasting still dominate? Kate frowned, but so many renowned wizards insist that gestures boost a spell's potency. True, Ryan acknowledged, gestures can bolster a caster's confidence, and occasionally, if your movements echo those of some legendary archmage, you might tap into an ancient, ineffable power. But that's not something you need to worry about right now. He paused, his tone growing serious. Believe me, without a specialized system guiding you, mastering modern magic alone can occupy you for an entire lifetime. Sometimes, knowing too much isn't a blessing, it can be dangerous. Kate's curiosity flared, but Ryan held up a hand. For instance, in the original story, Luna's mother perished in a reckless magical experiment, and Luna herself keeps, of all things, the horn of a poison-horn beast in her study, claiming it's the horn of a sea unicorn. Yet the legend says that horn would shatter at the slightest touch. Fascinating, but perilous. Ryan gave her a reassuring grin. That's enough off-road magic trivia. Let's stick to what matters. Seeing him steer the conversation away, Kate felt a brief pang of disappointment. But then she reminded herself they were about to discuss her favorite subject, her school of magic, with the one person she admired most. Warm anticipation replaced her unease, and all dissatisfaction melted away. Ryan led the way down the winding path. Our first stop today is the vampire castle, he announced, glancing back at Kate. I've been dying to see what real vampires are like. Kate's heart quickened. Vampires? Really? Ryan grinned. Oh, absolutely. But remember, we only cover them in 3rd-year Defense Against the Dark Arts, along with werewolves. He flipped open his notes. Class is in session. He cleared his throat and began reading. Vampires are, in essence, undead creatures that sustain themselves on human blood. In magical taxonomy, they're rated level XXX. They're found all over the world, though their feeding habits can differ by region. Legend says they can shift into bats, slipping in through open windows. Once inside, they revert to their true form only when their victims are asleep, then sink their fangs into the neck to drink. Kate shivered, imagining pale lips brushing warm skin. Ryan continued, if a victim dies of blood loss, they'll often reawaken as a vampire themselves, hungry, disoriented, and intent on feeding. They tend to target people close to them, family, friends, anyone they once trusted. Grave robbers who've excavated vampire tombs report finding bodies that remain startlingly fresh, skin still soft, with a faint reddish glow, as if the corpse were merely sleeping. He closed his notebook. Fortunately, traditional talismans still work. Crosses, garlic, and sanctified water can repel a vampire, or even destroy one if wielded correctly. But stronger specimens may require a potent banishing spell. Kate tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, excitement mingling with nerves. Let's hope we don't have to test any of that today. Ryan laughed. Fingers crossed, though I wouldn't be surprised if the castle's resident vampire has a few tricks up his sleeve. Together, they strode toward the looming fortress, ready for whatever dark wonders awaited inside. Some people claim that if you mix a vampire's blood with wheat flour and bake it into bread, anyone who eats it will be safe from vampire attacks. Ryan closed the tattered tome with a dismissive snap. That's pure superstition. The only reliable way to destroy a vampire is to break open its coffin, drive a wooden stake through its heart, and decapitate it. If you want absolute certainty, burn the body to ashes afterward. No chance of it coming back. He tapped the leather-bound cover thoughtfully. For a more detailed, though surprisingly accessible, account, read Elder Werpol's Blood Brothers, My Life Among Vampires. It's not just folklore, it's solid popular science. Chapter 38. The Secret of Vampires. Ryan leaned back in the Gryffindor common room, a well-worn copy of Gilderoy Lockhart's Traveling with a Vampire resting on his knee. Lockhart's version is entertaining, but don't take it too seriously, he said with a grin. He admitted later that the whole living on lettuce and water bit was a gimmick. No self-respecting vampire would survive on salad alone. Kate, perched on the arm of a chair with half a chocolate frog dangling from her fingers, raised an eyebrow. He mentions someone called Elder Walpole, doesn't he? Who is that? A legend among magical biographers, Ryan answered thoughtfully. Sir Lionel Walpole. He disguised himself as a muggle and spent months living within a vampire enclave just so he could write a first-hand account. He's also a member of the Slug Club. Lately, he's been pestering Professor Dumbledore for permission to interview Harry Potter directly. Plans to publish a Harry Potter biography, or so I've heard. Kate's mouth fell open as she nibbled the last bit of her chocolate frog. He actually got into the Slug Club, and he wants to make Harry the next star of his book? Ryan nodded. Apparently so. But here's the real scoop on vampires. They don't have to drink blood to survive. The whole blood-sucking thing is more of a curse than a diet. They can and do eat normal food. Kate nearly choked on surprise. Wait, vampires eat food? Like real meals? Absolutely. They can even stomach garlic, though they detest it so much they go out of their way to avoid it. That's why most muggles assume garlic is deadly to them. It's just their aversion, nothing more. Oh, and get this. Honeydukes sells a bloody lollipop that's surprisingly popular with vampire customers. Kate laughed, picturing a pale figure browsing candy shelves for a gore-tinted treat. Only in our world, she said softly. Ryan smiled, the flickering firelight dancing in his eyes. Exactly. In the wizarding world, the strangest things are usually the most real. Time had slipped away unnoticed, as though Kate and I were tucked into a hidden fold of time itself. When I finally glanced at my watch, 2 hours had passed. At 8 o'clock sharp, the soft strains of music whispered from the bat-shaped lamp overhead. In the center of the entertainment room, the dinner table split down the middle, and a small black coffin rose up between the sections. A hiss escaped from its seams, and a deep red broth began to spill out, coating the edges of the coffin. The lid creaked open to reveal a steaming beef stew, rich and ruby-hued, surrounded by a ring of crusty bread, which looked almost like pastry, crimped along a pot's rim. "Mr. Lane, good evening," came the wizard's crisp voice from behind us. His hooked nose caught the lamp's glow. "When you've finished your meal, press the bell to your left and the table will reset." I dipped my spoon into the broth. The stew was comforting and deeply savory, like tomato-braised brisket, but lifted by fragrant Romanian spices and a hint of butter's creaminess. Kate frowned at the sight of dinner, muttering that she shouldn't have filled up on snacks earlier. I, on the other hand, had known about tonight's feast in advance and had contented myself with a few chocolate frogs, just the right appetitive prelude for what lay before us. After the last unpleasant taste faded, Ryan suddenly pressed his hand against Kate's soft, furry belly. "What are you doing? Be careful, or I'll tell Pinello," Kate exclaimed, her cheeks flushing ruby red. But as a moment passed, she realized what he'd done. The heavy, overstuffed feeling ebbed away like a receding tide, only to be replaced by a sharp pang of hunger. "Ryan, how did you do that?" she asked, bewildered. Ryan's lips curled into a mischievous grin. "That's my secret. Now, dig in." "You little—" Kate began to protest, then relented, scooping up another bite with evident relish. When they'd finally finished eating, Ryan retrieved a well-worn volume titled Guide to Medieval Witchcraft. They settled together and leafed through its pages, pausing now and then to debate minor charms and spells under the flickering glow of Kate's bat-shaped lamp. By 11 o'clock, the lamp's light had dimmed to a gentle dusk. Kate stood, stretched, and made her way to the washroom to freshen up before bed. Ryan, however, remained alert and energetic. Blessed with a constitution of 31, no small feat, he scarcely needed rest. Only his heart, the wellspring of his magic, ever felt the slightest weariness. Enduring peak physical and mental form was effortless for him, but magic in this world drew its power from the heart. For that reason, Ryan deliberately upheld certain mortal habits. He ate regular meals, kept himself clean, and took time to rest. All the better, he thought, to keep his heart and his magic truly alive. Ryan pulled his toiletries from his pocket and made for the small bathroom. He splashed cold water on his face, swished some mouthwash, and scrubbed away the day's grime. Rather than linger and wait for Kate to finish her bath, he decided to change right there. He shrugged off his wizard's robe and tugged on a pair of pajamas covered in Australian opal-eyed dragons, quirky but comfortable. Stepping back into the hallway, Ryan found the bedroom at the end of the carriage. It was built like a giant coffin, its walls lined with dark mahogany and a silk canopy draped over a blood-red mattress big enough for 4 or 5 people. He ran a hand along the polished wood, and without even raising his wand, a faint aura of cleansing magic shimmered across the surface. Settling onto the plush bed, he fluffed a pillow and reached for the latest Daily Prophet. He skimmed the headlines, but nothing caught his interest. The wizarding world offered spectacular spells, magical illusions so immersive they felt like stepping into a virtual reality game, but to someone raised in the information age, they occasionally seemed stale. Here, there was neither Wi-Fi nor any network to hop online. Even the most enchanted distractions soon lost their luster. Ryan sighed and tossed the newspaper aside. The carriage's ornate decorations might astonish other witches and wizards, but to him, accustomed to the 21st century's constant digital whirlwind, they felt merely novel. He missed the pulse of online gaming, the chatter of forums, the endless stream of cat videos and news alerts. If only there were some way to plug his devices into this magical realm. He shook his head, extinguished the lamp beside him, and closed his eyes, listening to the gentle sway of the carriage as it rolled steadily into the night. Except for his magic studies, Ryan was as passive and unambitious as ever. If he'd truly possessed exceptional drive, he'd have made a name for himself in his previous life, and nothing about time travel seemed to have changed that lethargy. After a few minutes, Kate dug into her bag and produced a fresh set of clothes and a fluffy nightgown. Hugging an enormous lion plush, she crept inside and murmured to herself, "It's just a 7-year-old. I can handle this." Ryan glanced up, one brow raised. "Kate, you really love furry things, don't you?" She gave him a mock-offended look. "What's wrong with them? They're soft and comforting." Her nervousness vanished as she climbed over to the other side of the coffin. From a hidden pocket in the lion toy, she pulled out a well-worn copy of The Great Wizard of the 20th Century. For the next hour, the only sound was the gentle rustle of pages turning. Ryan watched in mild surprise at the quiet peace settling over them. When he finally looked again, Kate had dozed off, her head resting on the open book. The cramped, silent chamber felt unexpectedly cozy, and for the first time in a long while, Ryan found he didn't mind the stillness. Ryan stretched into a peculiar posture on the stone floor, then lay back and closed his eyes. Around him, arcane energy pulsed and coalesced, refining his vital essence. This was his latest innovation, a sleeping meditation version of his body transformation skill, a static exercise that honed his strength even as he rested. He and Kate had traveled to Bucharest, the capital of Romania, a country in southeastern Europe bordered by Hungary and Serbia to the west, Bulgaria to the south, and Ukraine and Moldova to the north. In the heart of the city stood an ancient castle, hidden from ordinary sight by a common wizard's concealment charm. To non-magical passers-by, it appeared as nothing more than an unremarkable plot of land, sometimes even provoking an inexplicable sense of urgency, but the castle itself remained invisible, allowing wizards to come and go unnoticed. By day, it served as a pay-to-enter horror attraction, complete with cleverly concealed traps and costumed vampire actors. Behind its ramparts lay the sprawling Romanian Longhorn Dragon Reserve, the world's largest and most important dragon sanctuary. Perched atop the castle's highest tower, traveling wizards often paused to admire the wild expanse below, the natural habitat of the Romanian longhorn dragon. Its black and green scales gleam in the sunlight, and its twin golden horns flash as it hunts with fierce precision, then breaks into sudden, playful acrobatics that echo across the valley. Chapter 39, Uncontrollable Instinct. Dawn's first light drifted through the leaves as a soft melody wove across the grove. Ryan's eyes opened slowly, only to realize he was still floating. With a long stretch, he exhaled a wisp of misty breath and straightened his posture. Leaning against a nearby tree, Kate watched him with those silvery, dreamy eyes of hers. "Ryan, what kind of magic lets you sleep in midair?" she asked, curiosity lacing her voice. Ryan offered a gentle smile. "It's not magic, it's instinct." He rose a little higher, the air parting around him. As a phoenix-born, he needed no wings to defy gravity. He was created to transcend every earthly limit, to reign supreme in the sky, immortal by nature. Kate blinked, stepping closer. "And you're so perfectly clean. No tousled hair, no morning breath, you practically glow." She paused, the edge of wonder in her tone. "It's like breathing in a pristine forest after a lifetime spent in smog." A soft chuckle shook Ryan's shoulders. "Even that is instinct." In an instant, his aura flared to life. Scarlet embers spiraled around him and wove themselves into a new garment of living flame. As he turned to face Kate, every aspect of him, his robes, his eyes, the air pulsing around him, shone with the untamed glory of the phoenix. How does an immortal creature become tainted by the mortal world? For Ryan, whose very nature instinctively recoils from even the faintest trace of dirt, purity was as natural as breathing. He had only just awakened and hadn't yet learned to soften his otherness. Right now, the raw allure of magic pulsed through every inch of his skin and every strand of his hair. For Kate, a mortal wizard with a hunger for longevity, the sight was hypnotic. Wizards say the closer you draw to magic, the more dazzling the world becomes. And in that moment, Kate felt it as never before. Before she could fully comprehend what was happening, Ryan's razor-sharp wizard's intuition, honed by years of arcane research, and his instinctive, magical thought process aligned perfectly. He saw everything with crystalline clarity. Even at home, Jack the house elf had always gazed at him with unwavering devotion, but Ryan had long taken that adoration for granted. Now he finally perceived how truly extraordinary his own existence had become. His body felt stronger, more flawless, his mind stretching toward something divine, especially after that ill-fated experiment with the forbidden level 6 death curse. It was a transformation not unlike answering the Ravenclaw dormitory's perennial riddle. Which came first, the phoenix or the fire? The only true answer is that there is no start or end. Each begets the other in an endless, perfect cycle. After unlocking the phoenix ability, Ryan discovered his original assumptions were off the mark. A phoenix, much like the ghost Peeves, is not a single creature, but a collective embodiment of the world's yearning for eternal life, a consciousness forged and refined by the passage of time. By tapping into that power, Ryan had skipped the traditional rite of passage all wizards face at 17, the subtle group thought curse that binds them. In doing so, he found himself growing increasingly removed from human limits. In the weeks that followed, the arcane talents he'd only encountered in books began to take shape in his own flesh. Spell-like powers entirely separate from any physical transformation. He learned to replace food and sleep with the raw influx of magical energy, even synchronizing his breathing to the rhythmic flow of the world itself. Then, during a deep meditation, he felt the primal surge of magic that only the very first generation of phoenixes ever possessed, wild, untamed, and fiercely alive. Yet with great power came the need for balance. To prevent himself from drifting into godhood, Ryan consciously shifted his mindset back to human terms, reminding himself how to think and feel like a mortal once more. When Kate found him staring off into space, she blinked and shook her head as if rousing from a vivid dream. For a moment she looked vulnerable, ashamed, as though she'd been caught indulging in wild fantasies, before slipping on a mask of cool indifference to hide her embarrassment. "We've arrived, Ryan," Kate said, abruptly changing the subject as they reached the crest of the hill. "All right," he replied, forcing a smile. "I'll wait for you outside." She turned and hurried down the slope, unaware that he was keeping his true reason for coming strictly to himself. He'd learned long ago. With Ravenclaws, if you haven't forged a real bond, never hand them your secrets. They'll betray you the moment they see a chance. Ravenclaws thrived on competition, constantly measuring themselves against one another and striving for every scrap of academic glory. Take Rita Skeeter or Gilderoy Lockhart, both Ravenclaws who'd resort to the most despicable slanders just to climb the house rankings. And they weren't exceptions. Most students from that house shared the same ruthless drive. Hufflepuff's prefect, Gabriel Truman, once mocked their arrogance in an argument over house honors. Ravenclaws boasted that every outstanding witch or wizard had come from their ranks, citing celebrities like Laverne de Montmorency and even claiming Bridget Wenlock as one of their own, despite her true Hufflepuff roots. Ryan recognized that brilliance often carried a darker side. Hermione had her moments, and he certainly wasn't immune. In the end, when Hogwarts was under siege, only Slytherin suffered heavier losses than Ravenclaw. It was a harsh reminder: never let your guard down where intellect and ambition collide. Although Hufflepuff was often sneered at by the other houses, Hannah Abbott of Hufflepuff and Seamus Finnegan of Gryffindor didn't hesitate when Voldemort's curse came hurtling toward them. Under the protection of Harry's shield charm, they sprinted straight into the Great Hall and threw themselves into the thick of battle. Bravery was second nature to Seamus, and Hannah's fierce resolve was fueled by hatred. Her mother had been killed by Death Eaters. Yet when life and death were on the line, they chose to fight. It was a reminder that even an ordinary Hufflepuff can display extraordinary courage. Too much analysis often causes us to lose the very spark that makes us human, something Ryan recognized all too well. He exhaled, shook off his tangled thoughts, and moved on. In the entertainment hall, the hook-nosed wizard was already waiting for him. After a few polite words, the wizard produced a neatly folded brochure. Inside were lists of dining and rest areas, warnings about particularly dangerous trap layouts, and the departure time for their next journey. Ryan took it with a nod, ready for whatever came next. With a sudden flash, the hook-nosed wizard vanished from sight, leaving only Kate and me alone in the castle's shadowed halls. I closed my notes with a soft sigh. No, this still isn't precise enough, I muttered to myself. The head vampire needs more depth. Just a one-dimensional villain won't cut it. 10 minutes later, Kate emerged from the bathroom, every inch the fearsome hunter in her custom leather gear. I handed her a neatly folded schedule. Here's the plan for today, I said. Breakfast is at 7 in the auditorium. Then, at exactly 9, we ring the bronze bell, and the vampires make their first move. She glanced down at the paper, as if it were an afterthought, eyes sparkling with excitement. What are we waiting for? She exclaimed. Vampire Hunter Kate stands ready. We climbed into the gilded carriage at the castle's courtyard. Without warning, the carriage floor trembled, and a hidden escalator rose from below, carrying us through winding corridors hewn from ancient stone. At the end of the descent, the doors swung open to reveal our target. A brooding medieval fortress draped in rolling storm clouds, lightning crackling across its turrets. It was the perfect stage for a vampire siege, and everything we'd been waiting for. Kate dashed ahead, her footsteps echoing through the torchlit halls like a startled deer. Ryan followed more deliberately, his eyes tracing the carved gargoyles and vaulted arches that framed the castle walls. The air vibrated with an electric tension. Overhead, jagged bolts of simulated lightning danced across a perpetual storm cloud canopy. This must be some kind of weather charm, Kate said, shielding her eyes as a flash illuminated the dark stone. But why is it still daylight? Vampires don't usually wander around in the sun. Ryan shrugged. It is a weather spell, but a crude one. Kate halted, puzzled. Crude? Why? He led her to a side corridor where the thunder overhead rumbled ominously. This is ancient magic, a prototype of today's weather enchantments. A true, modern spell of this scale would require at least 10 master-level wizards working in unison. Otherwise, the lightning would be real danger, not mere decoration. Kate's brow furrowed. 10 masters? That's an enormous undertaking. Aren't weather spells taught by fifth-year students? In principle, yes, but novice spells can only replicate gentle rain or drifting fog. To conjure sustained storms and to control every thunderclap so it never strikes someone, you need deep, esoteric knowledge. This particular spell dates back centuries and was crafted by a wizard with vampire blood in his veins. Ryan paused as lightning crackled directly above them, the thunder shaking the battlements. He wanted authenticity, down to the rolling thunder. He achieved it, but couldn't or wouldn't perfect the safety parameters. They rounded a final turn and arrived at the massive gate. Unlike most vampire keeps, there was no gilded mechanism or runic keypad, just two enormous iron doors. Kate's eyes lit up. With a grin, she stepped forward and pulled, swinging the gate open with a grunt of effort. Ryan raised an eyebrow. No wards? No magical lock? Kate laughed, stepping inside. This is the real deal. A fortress designed to keep out intruders by strength, not fancy spells. It's exactly how I imagined an ancient vampire stronghold. Ryan followed her into the courtyard. The storm overhead continued its eternal performance, but now that they were inside, it no longer felt menacing, only magnificent. And as they stood beneath the churning skies, they both sensed the castle still had many secrets waiting in its shadowed halls. In this magical realm, enchantment was woven into the air itself. You didn't need spells to sense its presence. Pushing open the heavy oak door, Kate and Ryan stepped into a long, dimly lit corridor lined with flickering torches. From the shadows above came the soft, eerie flutter of bat wings. After a brisk minute's walk, the corridor opened into a vast dining hall, where an opulent Romanian-style breakfast spread awaited them. Kate's eyes lit up at the sight of it all, but Ryan found himself oddly distracted. Some of the dishes looked so familiar, he almost thought he'd wandered into a Chinese tea house by mistake. Along one long table sat neat blocks of golden cornmeal cakes that recalled traditional mantou, and beside them, a porcelain tureen of creamy corn porridge studded with toasted nuts and crowned by runny, sunny-side-up eggs. Yet there was nothing mistaken about the rest of the fare. Platters of telemi, a crumbly, semi-soft sheep's milk cheese with a pleasantly briny tang, were arranged next to bowls of sweet jam and jars of thick honey. Scattered among the savory offerings were whimsically shaped donuts, each one infused with vanilla and flecked generously with lemon and orange zest. At last, Ryan thought, here was something he couldn't quite place, something entirely new and delightfully unexpected in the heart of this enchanted world. Chapter 40, Vampire Hunter. Kate pushed back from the table with a scowl. This is so inauthentic, she complained. The perfectly cooked breakfast had vanished as magically as it had appeared, and the great hall, though grand, lacked the grim Gothic atmosphere she'd expected. No cobwebs, no scurrying rodents, no bats clinging to the rafters. Only the occasional flash of lightning lent the place any hint of menace. Ryan sighed. Kate, calm down. This is the dining area, and the safe zone, as the manual clearly states. You've read the manual, right? Kate planted her hands on her hips and huffed. I'm a professional vampire hunter. I've devoured at least 10 vampire novels. Who needs a manual? Ryan stared at her, as if she'd sprouted fangs. You don't actually think we're going to storm a vampire's lair and defeat them with wands and spells, do you? Kate blinked. Isn't that how it works? Vampires are just supernatural creatures. Any competent wizard, wand in hand, could take one out in seconds. Unless there's a whole coven, I don't see the problem. Ryan's expression went flat. Right, there's one small catch. We can't use magic. Kate's jaw dropped. You mean no spells? Kate sighed and looked down at her fangs. My front teeth are like clubs, and my ear wrinkle curse is all set, she muttered. But at least there weren't any wands around. I couldn't imagine the poor vampire staff dealing with that. Wait till you see this, Ryan said, flipping open his tour manual. He pointed to a page crammed with every vampire hunting implement you could dream of. Silver stakes, garlic braids, wooden mallets, crosses, and enchanted nets. Wow! Kate's eyes lit up. Where do we get these? Right down the left hallway, Ryan replied. Everything's magically imbued. When the time comes, just give your target a good whack. It's all harmless enchantments, but it feels real enough. Let's go. Kate pumped her fist. Sir Kate, vampire hunter extraordinaire, is on the move. I am Salvatore Stefan, a dedicated, if not exactly glamorous, vampire. Most of my kind lays around in our protected enclave, but not me. I've always dreamed of stardom in the wizarding world, just like my hero, Shui Ni. So I trained relentlessly, and thanks to my modest good looks, I managed to outduel a dozen rival vampires. Before long, I landed a coveted spot on the famous horror tour. Now I live in a sprawling, centuries-old castle, every bit as lavish as those owned by vampire aristocrats, and spend my days role-playing the fearsome bloodsucker who hunts wizards disguised as muggles. It's the perfect gig, as long as Kate and her friends don't smash down my door with those enchanted mallets. Salvatore's work was truly remarkable. He had no wizarding allies, no Elder Wurple to immortalize him in a best-selling chronicle like Sweeney, no famous friend to thrust him into the spotlight. Instead, he became both author and protagonist of his own story, drawing on every role-playing session as raw material. In his daydreams, he ruled a real castle, stocked it with crates of crimson bloody lollipops, and even founded a hospital, just like those wealthy American benefactors he admired. To his surprise, readers loved his writing. Fan mail poured in, praising the vividness of his scenes. None were more enthusiastic than the self-styled vampire hunter who called himself Sir Kate. Every few days, Sir Kate would send Salvatore another frantic plea for advice on hunting the undead, and Salvatore was tempted to brush him off. After all, a skilled wizard could dispatch vampires without difficulty. But Sir Kate was a devoted fan, and besides, Salvatore had already covered much of this ground in his novel. So he took to his desk and replied, laying out his key recommendations. 1. Fire or sunlight. Vampires in his world didn't collapse into ash the moment they felt heat or rays, but exposure still weakened them severely. With that, Salvatore sent his letter off, confident that even if Sir Kate never thrilled a crowd with his ghost-slaying exploits, at least he'd be better prepared for the darkness that lurked between the pages. When you set out to hunt vampires, it pays to know their classic weaknesses. First, extreme heat. Exposing a vampire to open flame or unshielded sunlight sears its flesh and leaves it painfully vulnerable. Though they recover faster than humans, the intense heat softens their tissues and disrupts their supernatural resilience. Second, silver. Pure silver weapons inhibit a vampire's innate healing. An iron sword can certainly lop off a head or pierce a heart, and a well-trained vampire might even endure the agony, wrench the blade free, and miraculously reattach severed limbs. Silver, on the other hand, refuses to yield. A vampire cannot extract a silver blade on its own, and the wound it leaves takes far longer to close, keeping the creature weakened. Third, garlic. While some vampires learn to tolerate a small bite, the pungent herb remains deeply repellent. Surround yourself with garlic, garland your doorway, crush cloves at your feet, and no vampire will dare shift into a bat and approach. If they do, the stench forces them back into human form, often collapsing from the shock. Finally, a handful of folklore tips borrowed from Muggle legends can give you an edge. Toss rice, sand, or seeds in a vampire's path. Centuries of superstition say they're compelled to stop and count every grain. That obsessive distraction can buy you the crucial moments you need to escape or to strike the killing blow. Armed with fire, silver, garlic, and a few quirky tricks, you'll be ready for whatever the undead throw at you. Everyone knows the old wives' tales about warding off vampires, strings of bells, high-pitched dog whistles, and the like. Supposedly, the constant din drives them away. In reality, nothing could be further from the truth. For a human, that racket might feel like a flashing neon sign reading, "Dinner's served, live prey in the vicinity." Then there's the idea of knotting ropes into elaborate nets, on the theory that vampires will be drawn to these tangles and spend hours trying to untie them. If you can engineer a trap whose mesh is too tight for a vampire to slip through in bat form, it might work, but you'd need materials strong enough to withstand the full force of their fury. And of course, the grandest myth of all, displaying a crucifix or reciting scripture to banish the undead. Outrageous. If nothing else, it proves that some folks will believe any story so long as it sounds dramatic. Ever since his first book on vampire lore became a surprise bestseller, Salvatore has entertained the notion of quitting his day job. But without the steady stream of tours and seminars he currently leads, where would he find the anecdotes that fuel his writing? And who could say every future volume would hit the same heights of popularity? Today he's back at it. A new group of tourists has signed up for his Night Stalkers expedition. Thanks to a tip from his long-suffering, hook-nosed co-guide, this party is wealthier than the usual backpacker crowd, and they've secured permission to carry weapons from his private arsenal. Though enchanted, the blades and crossbows still draw blood, and with only half a dozen guests on board, Salvatore can steer the knight's adventures far more according to his own designs. As dusk settles over the old mill ruins, he checks his equipment one last time, smiling at the thought of the stories he'll collect tonight, stories that might just fill the pages of his next hit. Salvatore watched them with a bemused smirk. To his eyes, most wizards looked and acted alike, clutching wands they barely knew how to use, completely baffled by anything as mundane as a muggle weapon. None of them were true vampire hunters. They were travelers playing at magic. "Well, look at this," he drawled, turning to face the pair. "2 pint-sized wizards, just what I needed. My next book is already titled Home Alone, Vampire Attack." On the other side of the armory, Ryan stared in stunned admiration at Kate. Vampires, Ryan had always thought, were fragile creatures, easily dispatched by fire or a good sword blow. He himself could wield a blade as adeptly as any wand. But Kate, she moved like a seasoned hunter. The moment she entered the armory, she'd zeroed in on the tools she needed, a handful of blazing torches and a tightly woven silver net. Her reasoning was flawless. She'd tossed aside the heavy iron axe and bulky plate armor, items that looked impressive but would only slow her down, and instead draped a garlic necklace around her neck for good measure. Ryan swallowed hard. He might know how to fight magic and monsters, but watching Kate prepare was a lesson in true expertise. Kate gathered her team for one last briefing, her tone calm but commanding. "Physically, we wizards can hold our own against vampires, but we're a notch below in raw strength and speed. Worse, they can turn into bats almost as easily as an animagus shifts forms. That's why silver is crucial. The moment a vampire spots silver, they panic and flee into the sky as bats. In that situation, a net is far more effective than a sword." She lifted the coiled net at her side. "This will trap them mid-flight, and it can double as a staff if they get too close. Even if a vampire overcomes their fear of silver, they won't dare stick around once we light our torches and brandish garlic. The torchlight will keep the shadows and any hidden attackers at bay." Turning to Ryan, she said, "Ryan, you take the iron shield and the silver sword. Keep them from closing in on us, and don't forget your garlic necklace." She drew a quick diagonal line in the dirt. "We'll stand in this formation so we can support one another at a moment's notice. Keep your gaze forward, but use your peripheral vision to watch your teammates." Kate hefted her own shield, nodded once, then raised her voice. "All right, vampire hunters, move out!"